Good evening, Canby. Welcome to the Canby City Council regular meeting for July 18th, 2018, with our new start time of about 7 o'clock. If you please stand for the invocation and then the Pledge of Allegiance. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this community, for the leaders that are gathered here this evening. I pray for our community. A number of our members in our community are just hurting with tragedies of late, with car accidents and other just personal things, and so I just ask that they be lifted up, and that we rally around them and we think of them. I ask for just discernment and wisdom tonight as we deliberate matters here for our great city. I ask these things in your name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You throw me off every time. I know there's no comment. Good evening. We kind of a continuation. We had a work session earlier this evening to discuss some marketing pieces for the old library building. So we're kind of looking at what we can do about getting that maybe back out there and see what interest we get on that. So stay tuned for more on that. We'll move into communications this evening.
Yes, I just have one item that is before each of you, dated July 18th, 2018. I just wanted to alert you that when we put together the contracting and procurement policy, I had inadvertently, and it was my error because I didn't catch it, identified that the city administrator had a $25,000 purchasing authority. That number should have been $50,000 because that person acts as a city administrator in my absence. So making that correction, I just wanted to alert you that change is being made, and in the spirit of transparency.
Well, appreciate that. I know that came up in our conversation, so I'm glad to know that Council President Dale and I weren't totally crazy. So that's good. Okay, perfect. Anything else, sir? Okay. So now it's first opportunity for citizen input and community announcement. So this is the opportunity for those of you here, if you want to address the council on non-agenda items or make an announcement going on in the community. If you want to fill out one of these yellow cards real quick and run it over here to Ms. Schaefer, our city recorder. She'll make sure I get it. The cards I do have are for items on the agenda, so we'll come back to those. And we'll wait momentarily. Also for the agenda later. Perfect. Thank you. Seeing that, we'll move into mayor's business. So a couple, I have kind of a laundry list actually for the council and for the community. So Movies in the Park has returned. That came back and started last weekend. So there's three more dates coming up. Councilor Spoon, do you know the dates off the top of your head? Because I'm drawing a blank.
July 28th, August 11th, August 28th.
Perfect.
No, 25th.
25th. So yeah, so that's back, and the one on Saturday was, with everything that was going on, there was about 100 people there, so it was a really good turnout. Slice of Summer has also returned, so that starts this Sunday. So that'll be taking place in Waite Park. So they have, I think it's rock band playing this weekend. So
Melody Butchers.
The Melody Butchers, thank you. I went on YouTube. They're actually pretty good. They don't butcher the melody too bad. So, but that begins at 6 o'clock at Waite Park. I'm just going to kind of go through my list of things here. So I just want to reiterate for the community that in July 1, there was a new cell phone laws went into place, and had some conversation with our police chief and our lieutenant and our city attorney the other day, and it sounds like the decision's been made by our judge in congruence with our city attorney and the chief to definitely add some more teeth to the cell phone law here in Canby. So not only is there fines and whatnot, we have added that you will be required to take classes. So the first offense, they'll be required to complete a 2-hour online course and then and pay for that. A second offense within a 10-year period will require you to complete a 4-hour high-risk driving in-person class. So, and I'm sure that probably takes place on a Saturday, probably midday, so you don't want to avoid that. And then the third offense, we're just going to go straight to a Class B misdemeanor. So if you're talking on your cell phone, do it sitting in a chair at Gwen's Coffee House, or, hi Mallory, how are you? Or pull off the side of the road. Driving and looking down here is still talking on your cell phone. Holding it, as a chief, as we saw sitting at a stop sign, holding it like this is not hands-free. It's still in your hand. You still can get a ticket. Or worse, get into an accident and really, really hurt someone. So please, put it in the glove compartment. They make little devices. I think they're called like earbuds. I think they go in and you can, there's so much technology out there. So I'm just wanted to reiterate that fact for the citizens of Canby, that our police are out looking for it.
And
Joe.
Your Honor, just to reiterate, because you'd mentioned it, but then you highlighted the classes. Those classes are in addition to the fines that you get.
Correct, sorry, thank you, yes. I
And
did
the
look
first
at
one
it.
could go up under the discretion of the judge up to $1,000. The second one could go up to $2,000 if His Honor was so inclined, because that is actually the level of both the B violation and the A violation. And then, of course, when it becomes a crime, it can be up to 6 months in jail or $2,500 fine.
Okay, the step 3 is $2,500 and potentially 6 months in jail. So it sounds like the state's very serious about it. I hope that everyone else is serious about it as well. The Dahlia Building, August 9th, we are having our grand opening for the Dahlia Building. That'll be occurring at 10 o'clock. And we were just talking about this evening, and it sounds like the first tenant will be moved in prior to the grand opening. So always fun. It's going to be great. So please, if you want to come down, the developer will be there, and then some of the businesses that I think are looking to be tenants in the building will also be there. I had the opportunity to visit TMK Creamery, which is out on Dryland Road. I think a bunch of us took the trip out there. And yeah, so it's located out on South Dryland Road. It's our local creamery. They have a whopping 20 cows, but literally you walk in and their tasting room is right in front of their creamery, which then if you look out the window to your left, that you can see the cows that are actually being milked in the next building over. It was fascinating, and the cheese is amazing. And I believe you can buy it at Thriftway, and they're also open every Saturday for tours and educational pieces and whatnot. So, yeah, they're looking at doing ice cream, and they've got a couple other kind of really fun, high-profile stuff, I think, coming up. But yeah, South Dryland Road, very cool. I would please check them out and support them. At the end of June, myself and Councilor Hensley attended the Clackamas County Coordinating Retreat, and coming out of that, we've already kind of laid somewhat of a game plan or working plan for the remaining of the year. So we're looking at doing some things around there's a big housing bond that Metro is looking at coming up here for the 2018 ballot in November. We'll be having discussion on that coming up. The county is looking at a vehicle registration fee increase that they're still looking at what, again, I've kind of updated the council on, but still looking at what that price is going to be. They're still going to determine whether or not that's going to be one price for gas vehicles and a higher price for hybrids and electric cars. So that's still being discussed. We have yeah, basically the whole retreat was really around transportation and pieces that are coming up regarding that. So I-205 expansion, things at the Rose Garden corridor. Unfortunately, this ODOT and Oregon Transportation Commission are looking at tolling of I-5 and 205. So that's a piece that we're talking about and weighing in on that piece as well. I want to thank our Main Street manager and all of our volunteers for a great Independence Day celebration. If you missed it, I think there was probably about 10,000 people downtown for that event. I think it was the best one yet. I always judge it by how many people are lined up on the back end of the parade route where there's no shade, and there was a lot. And so, but yeah, it was a great event, and thanks to city staff for organizing that and putting that all together. Rick, kind of a to-do list, maybe item for, not kind of, an actual to-do list item for Amanda, if she could email out to the council the review forms, the fillable review forms for evaluations that we've got coming up for our reportees, that'd be great. Talked about the cell phone. Thank you to Joan Monin, the owner of the Wild Hare, for Hairfest 8 was this past weekend. If you don't know what Hairfest 8 or Hairfest is, it's the largest tribute band festival, I think possibly in the country. Ran 3 days, and I was there on Friday. It was a heck of a lot of fun, but definitely brought a number of people into the Canby area, so thank you to Joan and her team for that. The Oregon Mayors Association conference is here at the end of the month, which I'll be attending. So there's quite a few pieces on that agenda, which I'll report back at the end when I come back in the beginning of August. And then last night we had a Parks Board meeting, which I know everyone's been having a lot of conversation about that. So I've come with show and tell items. The first piece that I'm passing out to you guys is just it's the 2-month deferred maintenance report, and Jeff and Jennifer are here to Jeff, our parks lead, and then Jennifer, our public works director. Just in this sheet really is just kind of a snapshot look at the hours from last year for May to June compared to May to June of this year, and I've got some other pieces here that I'll dive into here to give you guys some more context on these things. But again, it's just kind of an idea of just showing kind of what's already being worked on. And if you look at literally like Legacy Park, almost all the way down to the end of the page, everything is about an increase in service and maintenance. So the Phase 5 property, which is undeveloped, increase in service. Legacy Park, more service level coming. The Forest Road path, they did a massive clearing. Jeff, that was in May, or still going on. But thank you, your team, for the Blackberry cleanup. Was that your team, or? Yeah, that was a massive Blackberry purging over there, so thank you for that. But you can just see kind of already some of the pieces that's already starting to increase. And again, second paragraph kind of down to note, we've hired 5 new Parks members have just come on board. So between May and, I think Jeff was just telling me the last one was just kind of started here in the last week or so. So we've got staffing time coming up. We've got, that learning curve piece. So I know a lot of people have been asking about parks and what's happening and what's going on. In Jeff's bi-monthly report, some of the pieces that we don't think about when we think about park maintenance that they do, they spent 4 hours on graffiti and vandalism over the last 2 months. Again, something that we don't take into consideration when we think about park cleanup. Regular maintenance is starting to be performed at the 34 areas the Parks Department is responsible for. That's parks, it's Knights Bridge right-of-way, that's the police department landscaping, that's the wastewater treatment plant property, that's Zion Cemetery, that's Timber Park. Quite a number of pieces that are there. And this is available, every other month for the public. You can pull that up, take a look at, and see what wanting to know what's going on with the parks and the $5 maintenance fee and where it's going, it's absolutely there to be looked at for sure. You know, I sat down with city administrator and went through and, so since we've approved the park maintenance fee, all right, so we just started collecting funds, which began back in February. We hired a new public works director, who's doing a great job and has been in position for, is it officially 6 months now? Close to 6. We've hired 5 new crew members, and so we went from, you know, trying to beef that up now that the training is going on, and so that learning curve. The park lead and public works director have been working on what is the workload, what is the work plan, and so they're working on those pieces. Along with bringing up parks that have been ignored, there's the increased maintenance that our parks require due to the amount of use during the summer. So we had a conversation with chief of police and lieutenant about this past weekend, and they guesstimated that on Sunday or Saturday or Sunday, there's about 2,000 people actively using Community Park along the river. So when you have that kind of influx of people on a 102-degree day, it's going to take some wear and tear on our parks. It's going to need to take time to clean it up. Request piece maybe for staff, and then Joe, did you already elevate my question or the concern that came up?
I did.
Okay. And that concern was just the need for making sure that we address the facilities out there more frequently, perhaps, when it's, you know, over 90 and we think the river's going to be used a lot. So Wade Park use has gone up, obviously, with all the events that are going on. Our Jeff is going to start including more of what's occurring with park maintenance and what's been deferred, what's being addressed, what's being worked on in his bi-monthly reports, so we have more visibility as to what's been going on. And then I'm going to talk about our parks tour that we had scheduled but had to reschedule, that's coming up, and you guys have some that are going to attend that, have some homework. And then the advisory board has been working on their recommendations to the council. So it may have seemed like there's not been a lot going on in parks, but there's a tremendous amount behind the scenes that are occurring. So now you kind of have a snapshot as to what's been going on in parks. I think the community has an idea of what's been going on since the $5 fee went into place. So things are happening, they are occurring on that piece. Questions or comments on just the initial kind of maintenance stuff and recap and reporting stuff?
So the next step is our tour, the parks tour, and then the committee coming back to us with another list of like recommendations, correct?
Thank you for the perfect segue.
Okay.
So yes, so August 1st meeting, I've instructed the Park Advisory Board to bring us their recommendations. So it'll be in our packet, it'll be ready to go for us to discuss and determine if that's fine, well, good, or we want more, we want less from them to start with. So that will be for the first meeting in August.
And then Brian, how long do we have to review that? Like at what point?
It'll be in the packet. I've already asked for Matilda to get it to Kim, so it's part of our packet when we get it.
So a decision will be made that night?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because there are a number of pieces we need to move forward on. So, well, I know you're out of town, but on vacation, but, you know, please, if you have opinions or want to weigh in, please get that to me, and I'll make sure that that's part of the conversation. And we can discuss offline too. So again, a lot of questions came up about service levels and whatnot, and in the conversation, I know that our public works director is working with the parks team on what does that look like in terms of staffing. What is the level we're at currently? Where do we want it to be? So in September, we are going to do a van tour, the Park Advisory Board. We've been invited. And so you're going to get a rating sheet, and you on your own before the van tour, you are going to go and you're going to rate a couple of the parks based on the criteria that our parks team is supposed to meet, and to see where we're just going to kind of level set and see because the conversation was, and surveys and whatnot, that the community thinks the parks are great, that they're great the way they're being maintained. And I know we've had conversation that some might be, and maybe a majority aren't. And so what is that lens that we want to look at? So if we're going to be working with Public Works to create a certain level set, once we've got, things caught up and we know what a level 3 maintenance looks like at a park, or what 4 is at Waite Park, if that's what we want it, if we get all the parks to that level, how many employee hours is that going to take to maintain that? And then if we look to add, the logging trail extension, or we want to add a splash pad, or we want to add whatever we're going to add, what is that going to do from a workload piece in terms of how do we manage that piece? So it's just a perspective piece for the Parks Board and whatnot. And I think Jeff will be asked to come along and give us his opinion on where he thinks some of these parks might be at. So that's more to come on that piece. Did you have a question?
I do. So when the Parks Board brings the Parks Board brings the recommendation to us, at what point are we making a decision on that recommendation? Are you saying that night a decision will be made, or it's for us to review for a period of time and then we make a decision?
My goal, and I think it's been our goal, is we want to get things moving along. And so, like I said, that evening with the recommendation, I think the Parks Board is looking for us to bless their recommendations, or that we take the recommendations. Thank you, we appreciate it. We'll take it under advisement. I mean, there's a lot of ways that we could probably take that for conversation. I mean, one of the big things that we've talked about that is a recommendation from them is taking a look at the Parks Master Plan. We know that that's something that we want to do. So that's might be, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I know that is in there as a recommendation. So we know that that's something that we want to take a look at. So that is something that we can probably make actionable sooner than later. So does that answer?
No, my question is more, and I apologize, it's just that, I made it clear very early this year that I would be gone that week, so I'm a little frustrated about the placement of that agenda item that particular week. So will a decision be made that night on whether or not we're adding a new park and what new park that will be?
No.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, that will not be occurring.
Okay,
Yes.
that's, I was just looking for clarification. When you say we're blessing their recommendation, what scope are we talking about?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, because they have broken into two pieces. There are assumptions and then there are recommendations. Right. Okay, so assumptions being, for example, that we're going to take a look at the Parks Master Plan. Okay, that's for them. They agree that that's something that needs to be done. In their recommendation, I believe there is 2 recommendations that we look at if we're going to do any parks. They have 2 recommendations as to what might be the first couple of things that we should do. Okay. That is a recommendation from them. Will that be necessarily voted on and be those 2 items that evening? Probably not. It'll be, that's a recommendation from them. It's then for us to go through and figure out, okay, how do we want to approach these pieces? Is there more that we want to send? Because I did warn them that there's a great potential that they're going to have a lot of work to do over the next couple of years as a board, because this is a high priority for me. It's a high priority for our community, that they're going to be doing a lot of work, and they're going to be reviewing a lot of probably past plans to figure out what they're going to do in the future. So I've given them that warning. So it's a recommendation on what next steps we take, and probably that first step, in my opinion, and we can talk about it later, is looking at the Parks Master Plan and what pieces of that do we want to revisit, what do we want to add, what do we want to change.
No, I'm comfortable with that. My concern was that I was going to be excluded from the decision-making process, and I
would not allow that to happen.
I was hoping as much. Thank you, sir.
I'm trying to be sensitive to summer vacations. Yes, Councilor Hyde.
I'm kind of confused. They did bring their recommendation a couple months ago, and we had our joint work session, and then we all gave our responses to you, and then you took them back. I mean, I guess they got those responses, but why aren't we considering those original recommendations? Why are we asking for new recommendations? That's what I don't understand.
I'm not sure I follow your question. I mean, the recommendation is that they've put
That they
forth.
proposed up in our joint work session, remember, a couple months ago? They kind of laid out their 5 priorities.
Sure.
So are they retooling those 5?
They have spent the last couple of months since our meeting retooling those, correct?
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Okay. Great. That's what's going on the Parks Board front. And that concludes my list of items for tonight. And we've got 2 counselors out on excused absences, we'll say. Counselor Hensley, you are up for council liaison reports.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You already covered C4 retreat, the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee. I also attended the Clackamas Cities Association dinner, and I wanted to thank Mayor Holliday and the City of Orchid City for hosting us for that. I also attended the chamber luncheon. The chamber director does a good job of putting that together, but thanks to the Thriftway for always hosting us. This month we had a legislative update, kind of a town hall style update with Senator Olson and Congressman Kurt Schrader. So it was nice to have him in town and hear from him. Excuse me. And you did thank Jamie and staff, and I want to reiterate that and thank Public Works for all their work, but really I wanted to thank all the citizen volunteers it takes to pull off that Canby Independence Day celebration. Without their boots on the ground, it wouldn't be possible. So thanks to Jamie and Public Works, but also thank you very much to the citizen volunteers for making that happen. Traffic Safety Commission, we had a citizen come in with concerns on 13th Avenue again, so that's kind of an ongoing conversation. It'll be on the agenda again for our August meeting, so I'll have more information on that, but it has been a recommendation from the commission to have a 4-way stop put at 2nd and Cedar by the business center there behind the post office. Because that's been an area of concern in the neighborhood. And I believe Jerry said, and Jennifer can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're doing crosswalk striping on 2nd and Douglas as well, right? Not a stop, but just some crosswalk on the other side of the post office. So a lot of safety enhancements going on over there soon. And I also wanted to mention we have a couple of openings on the Traffic Safety Commission, so if you're interested in participating in those traffic conversations, please get with Kim and get an application in. And I think that concludes that piece, but I did want to mention one other important thing to me, and that is the Suicide Prevention Task Force that I'm working with has finally made some good progress, and I wanted to show something I'm really proud of. We have these flyers. This is just a first run. I'm even more excited about the second one that's about to happen. But you'll be seeing these flyers in some businesses. We're asking businesses to host these like in their restrooms and stuff, so that people who might be in need of this kind of help has their undivided attention, and they can see this flyer. It says, "You are not alone. Start a conversation. It could save a life." And it actually has some tips on how to have a conversation with somebody that you think might be at risk, and it has resource phone numbers as well to lead them to help that they may very much need. And we have it in a little pocket card as well. So the first run is pretty small because we're actually retooling it a little bit, so the back side of the flyer will be in Spanish. And these little pocket cards will be more like a tent card, so it's bilingual as well. So you'll be seeing these distributed in businesses and in the schools and the library and in a number of places, especially where the youth can get them, but they're not only for the youth. So I just wanted to share that, and I'm really proud of the work we're doing on there. So that concludes, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Councilor Dale.
Yes, sir. Councilor Parker asked me to pass on his report for tonight as well. So for the Historic Landmark Commission, they did not have a meeting in July, but one of their members has had to resign for personal reasons. So there's an opening on that committee. And question, Kim? What committee? HLC, Historic Landmark Committee. So if anyone's interested, you can see our city recorder about that. And then the last week of school, the chair met with 4 high school students interested in learning more about the high school position on the commission and the work of the commission itself. So they've made no recommendations to us yet, but there's been some interest. Regarding the bike committee, at their last meeting, they met with our public works director to discuss updates on construction projects. And the committee is following a grant that the school district received for Safe Streets to Schools. So they'll be coordinating with them on that. And on Main Street, Councilor Parker passes on his thanks to Jamie and the staff for another year of great memories for our kids. And our next big event is Canby's Big Weekend. And he wanted everyone to know that this year we wound up with more volunteers for the 4th of July than we have in the past. So he passes on his thanks to Canby. And as you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, the citizens really drive it, making it happen. For Canby Utility, they have renewed their intergovernmental agreement with Clackamas County for reverse dialing services for emergencies. And that's just a fancy way of saying that if Canby Utilities, for instance, had a boil water alert, Clackamas County would do the dialing to our homes and cell phone numbers. Whatever phone number of record that Canby Utility has on your account, they could call and let everybody know that there's an issue going on. They have increased their system development charges for the next fiscal year by 2.75%, in line with published inflation figures. The emergency water system that I've talked about in the past is ready for deployment. For those that don't know, Canby Utility it's a towable on a trailer emergency water supply filter is really what it is, filter and treatment plant. So if there was an issue with our water supply, which comes entirely from the Molalla River right now, and it became non-potable, they could tow this trailer to Baker Prairie Middle School and tap into the well that the school district has there and get fresh, drinkable water out of it. It might not be the tastiest that you're used to, but it would meet state and federal sanitation requirements. It's not a high-velocity filter. They cannot charge our water lines with it. It's really meant just to fill jugs and containers that people would bring in a real emergency. So anyway, that's available and standing by. And as everyone heard in the news, the city of Salem had some difficulties in the previous month with cyanotoxins in the water that made their water totally undrinkable. They couldn't even boil it and be safe. They could not drink it. And they are now in the clear now. As a recap, cyanotoxins come from a particular kind of algae that grows in places like Detroit Lake, which is upstream from Salem's water supply. Now, Canby is not as susceptible to that as, say, Salem is, because all of our water does come from the Molalla River, which is what's called a high gradient stream. That only means it flows pretty fast. So that type of algae doesn't get much opportunity to grow and cause problems. And to date, there's been no requirement at the state or federal level of testing for cyanotoxins in your water. Well, the state Department of Health Services has fixed that. They've issued an administrative rule that all water supplies have to be tested every other week for cyanotoxins. And for the first year at least, the state of Oregon is paying for those tests, which is a nice thing. They're pretty expensive. They're about $500 a piece. So that program is in place. Canby Utility is doing it. You can ask why not more often. The answer is the state has deemed that every other week is often enough. And getting the test results takes, guess what? About 2 weeks. So unless you get into some real rolling pattern, that's what the state has deemed to be a reasonable testing. And that takes care of that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's right.
Hello. So to repeat, yay, Canby Independence Day was a good time. I co-direct the parade. I've done that the last couple years, so we're fine-tuning it. Hopefully it'll be even better next year. So that's good. Hair Fest, I actually went. There was the Sunday event this year. It was called Hair Fest for All. So actually kids 18 and younger were actually allowed to go. And so I took my family, and it was really interesting to see. I mean, clearly the big party was the several days before, so it was pretty low-key. But anyway, like, it's so impressive that Joan Monin puts that on. So wanted to give her some credit for that. Slice of Summer, as the mayor mentioned. I'm actually volunteering. I'm on garbage duty for the second one, August 5th, so I'm excited to volunteer for that. But there are other volunteer opportunities for the different concerts. He said July 22nd, August 5th, and August 19th. But come, it's I think 6 to 8 p.m., free concert at Waite Park. It's a good time. So we're glad to have that back. There was a hiatus for a year or two without it. With the library board, there's a new chair now, so we wanted to welcome Kathleen Myron. She was the vice chair. Now she's the chair of the group. Roger Reif has been chair for like at least 4 years, and he's out now, so hats off to Roger, but they're excited to have Kathleen in now. The Library Foundation, as I mentioned last time, they put on that STEAM summer camp for a week in the makerspace for middle school kids. It went quite well. 16 kids signed up. They got a bit of an education on flying, so they had a good time. They'll do it again next year because it was pretty successful. The library is going to start tabling apparently at the farmers market here on Saturdays. They're going to issue library cards. They might have a mobile circulation cart with them and just kind of promote library services. So I'm glad they're doing some new outreach. It's great of them. They've got that as one of their goals, so they're enacting that goal. And then the Friends of the Library, for the first time, is having a patio tour. There's a lot of events going on this summer. It's August 4th from 10 to 2. 6 homes are opening up their cool gardens. For $15, you can come behold these gardens. So it's a good fundraiser for the Friends of the Library. And then CAT, Cambria Area Transit, I missed their last meeting, but there's a survey out. It's going to close pretty soon here. But it's a community-wide survey. It's online. There's also a paper version right here in the lobby. It's for what does the community want to see with expanded service? Like, what would you want our funds to be spent on? Would it be Saturday service? Would it be kind of circular route in future, or if and when the time comes to expand? So if that's of interest to you, please feel free to do that. And I'll have more on those survey results in future when they analyze them. All right? And that's all I've got.
Yeah, thanks, Councilor Hine. I think the piggyback on the Cambria Area Transit piece, so House Bill 2017 has brought in, made transit a very big focus of funding.
Yeah.
And so CAT will actually, we just approved their master plan literally a couple months ago, but because of the amount of money that's going to go towards transit, we'll literally have completed that plan like within the next couple of months. So they're looking at other pieces to be able to put into play. And as Councilor Hart was saying, they're looking at, is it a Saturday route between here and Oregon City? Is it here, is it up and down between Oregon City and Woodburn? And then are we, do we want more of a daily circular around Canby? So that's a lot of the survey questions are around that. So yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate that. Thank you. Councilor Spoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was no CTV5 or Adult Center meeting since last time we met. Mayor Hudson and I met with the chair of the Southwest Neighborhood Association? Is that her official title?
Yes.
To discuss some issues pertinent to the Southwest area of Canby, and it was nice to just kind of connect. I mean, I happen to live in that part of town, and you aren't too far away from it either, so we were aware of some of the issues that come up there, but it was a nice opportunity to connect on citizen concerns from her perspective and the outreach that has gone her direction to connect with that. Bridging Cultures, this Saturday is their picnic. They do it every other Saturday. This Saturday is the one that they do at Waite Park. So if you're accustomed to going and usually go to Locust Street Park for it, this Saturday is the one a year that they do at Waite Park. So there's a free lunch and an opportunity to connect. At the last Bridging Cultures picnic, they did it in conjunction with Unite Oregon City, and they were making piñatas. The kids were making piñatas there, and it was really great. Anyway, so this Saturday is at Waite Park. Also, next week starts and I think this is the second or third year that they've done a STEAM camp over the summer. It's about 2 weeks long. They do it at Eccles. The students are nominated by their teacher during the school year, but it's kind of neat to see them reach out in other ways and connect with children and kind of build an education program that reaches across ethnic, racial, language barriers, all of those things. Movies in the park, I'm just going to add on to that we had Scott Anderson, who's a Canby High grad. He and I graduated together in 96, and he came and did a free magic show before Movies in the Park, and it was really exceptional, and he didn't charge us for it, even though he goes to Vegas and the Magic Castle and was on America's Got Talent. I'm sure is way out of our pay grade, but he came and just did a fantastic magic show and really helped to make it a community event, so I wanted to extend some thanks to him. In addition to what everyone else has said about July 4th, I wanted to send a special thank you to the Canby Fire Department. Once again, just another amazing, amazing fireworks show, and that's all donations of time and money, and was really fantastic. And I know that they're already working towards their deposit on next year, because that's a huge expense, and I'm sure they'd be happy, though I'm sure it's in your recent memory they're already planning ahead for next year. So if you enjoyed it, stop by and donate a little bit towards their deposit for next year. It goes a long way. You mentioned Hairfest for All, but I wanted to add to it that it was also a fundraiser for the Children's Cancer Association, and I thought it was a nice addition to have an under 21 day, even though my kids had no idea why I knew all the songs and they knew none of them. I'm not sure if I seemed really cool or not cool at all, but I definitely knew something they didn't know for once, or didn't even claim to know. The Cars band was great. In fact, my 10-year-old told me they were pretty good for some old rockers, and I was like, gosh, I wonder what they say about my husband and I. Just another great event that brought a ton of people to Canby, and my husband and I were out that weekend. We attended a couple of times, but we're also just kind of in some restaurants around town interacting with people that came into town for Hairfest, and every single one of them told me what a great experience they have, not just at the festival, but in the town, how great our town seems, how friendly the people are. Just, they really got our sense of community, and so that was just some nice feedback from our visitors. I made a statement at the last meeting on issues of separating families at the border, and I just wanted to give an update and say that Mayor Hodson did meet with me to discuss it, and we've talked about some potential things that we can talk about in the future. So just so you know, it has not been forgotten, it's just in discussion. So I appreciate that you took time to sit down with me about that. Another note is that I wanted to thank the library. The Canby Library has made a book available that the Canby School District decided to exclude from Oregon Battles of the Book this year at the school district level. And so if your child participates and they're competitive and want to move on to the next levels, that book that's been excluded by Canby School District is available at the Canby Library, and they can access it there. So I thought that was great to give access to the students. And then I think that's it.
All right, great. Thank you all. Kim, since you're keeping note of open board positions, there's also one on the Park Advisory Board. Okay, you knew that already. I know, you're all-knowing and all-powerful, so thank you. We'll move into the consent agenda for this evening.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the minutes of the June 20th, 2018 City Council regular meeting and the appointment of Sally Douglas to the City Budget Committee for a term to expire on June 30th, 2021.
Motion's been made by Council President Dale and seconded by Councilor Hensley to approve the consent agenda, which include the adoption of the minutes of the June 20th, 2018 City Council regular meeting and appointment of Sally Douglas to the City Budget Committee for a term to expire on June 30th, 2021. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? To count tonight.
4.
4-0. Thank you.
No voting by proxy.
Moving into resolutions and ordinances.
The first item we have is Resolution 1294. This is designating the Southeast 13th Avenue Sanitary Sewer Improvement Project as an advanced finance public improvement and providing for an advanced finance reimbursement from benefiting property owners.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, you may remember last winter we had the Milano pump station before you. One of the component pieces of that larger project was a gravity feed along 13th Avenue, which involved the creation of an advanced financing district. We had some considerable discussion. I actually asked Kurt McLeod to come and speak to the technical aspects of advanced financing districts with the council and members of the public that were viewing on that evening. We have a determination based on the completion of the project that $193,795 has been allocated for funding through the Advanced Financing District, and it's distributed to the benefiting property owners. Based on this list, there are essentially 4 properties that are benefiting property owners. You have in your packet who those property owners are and what the allocation methodology is. Staff recommendation today is that you approve Resolution 1294, adopting the final Advanced Financing District cost allocation for the Southeast 13th Avenue sanitary sewer improvements. I would also add that these advanced financing districts don't require payment or reimbursement to the city until such time as the affected properties improve, and such time as they develop.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any questions regarding this pump station and the financing piece of it? Okay, take a motion, and if there's no questions.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt Resolution 1294, designating the Southeast 13th Avenue Sanitary Sewer Improvement Project as an advanced finance public improvement and providing for advanced finance reimbursement from benefiting property owners.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Hensley and seconded by Councilor Height to approve Resolution 1294, designating the Southeast 13th Avenue Sanitary Sewer Improvement Project as an advanced financial public improvement and providing for advanced finance reimbursement from benefiting property owners. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That carries 4-0.
The next item we have is Resolution 1295. This is just sort of a housekeeping resolution. This is codifying and compiling certain existing general ordinances for the city of Canby. So this is just codifying all the ordinances in the code that have been adopted since the last time.
We had that in our packet, and didn't seem as many as I thought there would be, Kim.
You know, how often do you do it, Kim? Is it every year and a half?
Try to do about every year, but this year we were a little late because we had several ordinances come through that affected the code late, so we were a little later doing it.
Well, I'll make a motion.
Fantastic.
I move that we adopt Resolution 1295, codifying and compiling certain existing general ordinances for the city of Canby.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Height, seconded by Councilor Spoon to approve Resolution 1295, codifying and compiling certain existing general ordinances for the city of Canby. Any further discussion? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That also carries 4-0.
The next item we have is Ordinance 1485. This is before you for second reading. This is amending Canby Municipal Code, Chapter 10.04.100 regarding storage or abandoning of vehicles on streets.
And I could say a word or two here. This is second reading, so you saw this before, and this was a kind of a cleanup of the language just to be less ambiguous. It's a parking ordinance, so we added the word park in a couple of places, and then we actually changed the time frame to be, I think, a more reasonable time frame to be parked on the street, which is 72 hours before then you would be warned that if if somebody complains and they prove that you've been there 72 hours, you get a nice little warning that says if it's there for another 72 hours, then you could be towed. So that's basically how that works.
So just for clarification, I want to make sure that I understand this. So that 72-hour clock begins when someone calls it in as a complaint,
Yeah.
and code enforcement goes out, marks it in whatever fashion sheet they do. That's when the 72-hour clock starts. So they could have been already sitting there for 4 days.
Correct. And, sometimes abandoned vehicles are different than parked ones. Abandoned ones, somebody might run out of gas, park a stolen car somewhere and run off or whatever. If we always try to make the best determination about who owns it and all of that, even ahead of that. So, but sometimes people wake up and there's some random car parked in front of their house, and they might complain, and they might then start tolling that 72 hours to see if somebody will actually come back and see the sticker and say, okay, maybe I better get it out of here.
So it is communicated via sticker by code enforcement, so it's clear. Very
Yeah, she'll put hangers on things. If she figures out where it's the owner, she'll go put a door, thing on there to say, please call me, and make sure that you're moving your car, that sort of thing. So it's a fairness thing, but it's also a complaint driven for the most part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that. Any other questions for Joe?
No. Mr. Mayor, I move we adopt Ordinance 1485, an ordinance amending Canby Municipal Code, Chapter 10.04.100 regarding storage or abandoning of vehicles on streets.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Hensley, seconded by Councilor Height to approve Ordinance 1485, amending Canby Municipal Code, Chapter 10.04.100 regarding storage or abandoning of vehicles on streets. Second reading, roll call vote.
Counselor Hensley?
Aye.
Counselor Dale?
Aye.
Counselor Height?
Aye.
Counselor Spoon?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0.
The next item we have is ordinance 1488. This is amending ordinance 1427 regarding marijuana definitions.
And we had discussed this before about whether or not the council wanted me to come back with an ordinance that would amend just the definition of our ban on marijuana businesses here. If you'll recall, the general election back in November of, actually you guys, was it November 2015? It's been a while. The House Bill 3400, after Measure 91 passed allowing for recreational marijuana, had, in reaction to that, had kind of a compromise in it about situations where communities had voted pretty closely on whether or not they wanted to continue to have marijuana banned from their localities. And so this council at the time had voted to ban businesses in just its city. And because of House Bill 3400, it got sent to the general vote, the general electorate, to see if the ban would be upheld. And so here we are now with the ban from the original ordinance that you guys had. Originally, the ordinance, which I suggested the language, so this kind of falls on me, had a marijuana definition, which is it encompasses all and every bit of that plant and anything that ever comes from it. It just so happens that we did this in part because the League of Oregon Cities was kind of putting out a model ordinance to kind of help cities out, but also with the idea that, recreational marijuana was coming downstream towards cities, and it was a question of whether or not cities wanted to accept that in their towns, or whether they wanted to maybe, have it out in the county and in other cities that accepted marijuana businesses and processors and manufacturers. Anyway, fast forward, and what we have now is, because of that original banning every last piece of marijuana, we don't have carve-outs that actually exist in both state and federal law. So state and federal law do allow industrial hemp because it's considered more of an ag product. And so federally, and one of the drums that I always beat, because I'm a lawyer and because I'm scared to, violate any level of law, so I always want to make sure we're following our local, our state, and our federal, is that I've always put forward that we need to make sure that we're always following. I can't just say, yeah, follow state law, ignore federal, or vice versa. And so I've always tried to assist you guys in understanding from a legal perspective that I think, you're on safest ground if you're only allowing businesses in the city of Canby that follow all those levels. Well, this is a case where both the federal law and the state law have actually carved out marijuana to have a completely different approach to industrial hemp. In the Farm Bill, the 2014 Farm Bill, the federal government allows industrial hemp, and there's a definition there of that. And then, of course, in Oregon law, there's a different statute, and I had it written down here, but it's primarily ORS 571-300 and some subsequent it's also defined in some subsequent OARs. But the long and the short of all of this is that federal law and state law allow for basically the agricultural product of industrial hemp because it has such a low, by definition, THC component, and it's actually treated much differently because it's not useful at all in the psychotropic or psychoactive seekers. Nobody's going to make a product that basically gets you high from it. So it's treated much more for other properties that it has. whether it be rope or, cloth or paper or, in some cases, oils, right? So I'm still of the mind that we should follow all federal and state law. So what I've done is I've brought this language forward that I think is the safest avenue, which is to say we're only going to do what both the federal government and the state government allow as it pertains to industrial hemp. If we want to do that, all we simply have to do is carve that out of our definition in our ban. We can keep our ban. The ban came from you guys. It was basically further accepted by the populace. I forget what the percentage is, but I think it was over 60% of the vote. Some may think that those percentages have changed over time as our state and our communities have all kind of grappled with this and gotten used to it. But I'm still of the mind that we're on our safest ground because the federal government still has a different view of this, is to still follow the federal, state, and make our local law all kind of conjoin as best as they can. So I'm just simply suggesting here that we only recognize businesses that would deal exclusively with industrial hemp and its products. So that's why my suggestion misunderstood, but I just wanted to lay out kind of why we're here and what we're doing.
So I'm going to thank you for that, Joe, and thank you for bringing this piece forward. I'm going to lay out just kind of for us here on the dais, because we do have people in the audience that want to talk to us about this as well. I want us to make sure we ask any questions first before we get into any discussion. So questions that we have, I will then let those that have filled out yellow cards to share their piece with us, and then we'll have our own discussion up here on kind of thoughts, what we want to do, don't want to do, or whatnot. Does that sound teed up well enough for everyone here? Okay. So what questions, if any, do you guys have for Joe?
I have one. It's kind of a silly one in a way, but you know how it says the definition here in the packet? It says marijuana means the plant cannabis family. Like plan? Why?
Oh,
Is it supposed to be
I
plant?
sent you out an.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I missed that. I'm like, is there some?
Well done. Yeah, that was a typo that somebody else already made
Okay.
fun of me for, too.
Sorry
It's
about
actually
that.
the plant.
All right. That's clear then. Great.
Okay.
Joe,
Yeah.
what's the state and federal position on CBD derived from industrial hemp?
Well, this is actually kind of the $24 question in many respects. As of recent, the federal government, through the DEA, schedules marijuana itself and any extracts from that plant as a Schedule I substance. But they also at the same time have the 2014 Agricultural Act, known as the Farm Bill, that actually allow for industrial hemp and its products. So there is a case that went up through the Ninth Circuit. It's being appealed right now. The question in that case was a little more singular in that it was the extract in and of itself. Could it be scheduled as a Schedule I, absent further proof that it was either fully from industrial hemp or not? And so I think there's still a question, a legal question out there as to whether or not, because there is a body of products that are singularly from industrial hemp versus ones that are somewhat from industrial hemp, but then maybe not all. And there's even further ones that are intentionally mixed for some of the psychoactive effects to be mixed with some of the, I guess, anxiety effects. I'm purposely wording this in a way that allows for industrial hemp because there is at least that ag product out there that is recognized at both levels of government, both federal and the state. One of the things that people do when they come here to see if they can have a business license or not is they state what they are doing. it's up to them still to follow the law. I mean, what I don't want the city to do is sanction any illegal business. And I think our definition here can be as such and still not be an illegal business for the purposes of us sanctioning it or not. But as I think our conversation went before, businesses still have to pay their taxes, right? If they evade taxes, they could be prosecuted by the IRS. That doesn't mean we would take away their right to conduct business here because they have to promise to us in advance and swear and somehow prove to us that they'll pay all their taxes. The enforcement feature of that is somewhere else. In a sense, this is the same here. The OLCC is going to regulate, marijuana as it does statewide, and the federal government will prosecute however it basically wants. And I would always warn people, I mean, I cannot advise anybody legal advice-wise, but I think marijuana is still shaky ground in many respects. So, I mean, as long as there's certain open questions out there, people have to decide for themselves if they're conducting business, whether or not they're on shaky ground or not. What I'm trying to do is define it in a way that I think will follow federal and state law, and then therefore I can say, to you guys and advise you guys that you're on safe ground. If they come and they want a business license and they say, yes, we will follow your industrial hemp only, then good, you can have a business license if this passes. Otherwise, you're on your own to determine whether or not you're on thin ice with CBD oils that are coming from some other source or not proven to be a limited type.
So by virtue of you presenting the language to us, you are comfortable in your legal opinion that CBDs or any product derived from industrial hemp, as defined by the Farm Bill, is in compliance with federal law?
Yes, I think that is where the case law is. The one particular gray area is whether or not CBD itself is, prosecutably Schedule 1. I mean, when we mention products coming from industrial hemp, I mean, I think it's up to them to argue whether or not with the federal government, if they get in a jam somehow, that their product was squarely covered by the Farm Bill. So, I mean, what I'm trying to do is just do just that and say it's got to be the federal and the state law because it says as defined by them. So as long as they're following the federal and the state definitions, they're going to be fine.
Okay, so you're
for the purposes of Canby sanctioning their business.
So you're giving the Farm Bill preeminence over how the DEA may view it. Because it sounds like there's a conflict between legislative and executive there.
Well, what I'm trying to do with this is, I mean, insofar as there's a conflict, I mean, I don't say federal administrative law or federal criminal law. I say federal law, meaning all federal law. So if they be on their safest ground, they need to determine what that is for themselves because they're the businesses. If they can say, we're working with industrial hemp only for the purposes of getting a business license here, that will pass muster with our local. But I can't be the citizen's attorney, as I say. I am the city attorney, so I'm just protecting us.
Right, gotcha. Yeah, I think the test that I shared before, kind of my personal test is, are we reducing it to the level of, if whatever you're doing and making, is it the same as rope you'd buy at Home Depot, right? So you were agreeing that's what we're trying to do here, right?
Yeah, and I guess there's other, things that are being made from industrial hemp that are allowable in that you can get through the mail. But I'm not going to make a determination for people on what that is in terms of,
the onus is on them, which leads to my second test is, and we have no say over this at all, but as the license holder, are you willing to deposit your checks, your revenue in a federally chartered bank?
Yeah.
So.
Well, and there are all sorts of growing pains that are still happening in this area, both at the state level and the federal level. And I'm just trying to offer a way to relax what I think is a way overbroad definition, which potentially steps on the toes, I think, of some law that was trying to potentially preempt localities as a strictly agricultural product. If that kind of further fleshes that out for you.
It does. And there is room that we are probably doing some amount of interpreting voter intent.
You are the policymakers, and that's why it's before you.
That was a very lawyer answer. Yeah, it was very lawyer. Yeah, Councilor Hensley, then Councilor Spoon.
Joe, just to trying to make some differences for everyone to notice the differences between industrial hemp and marijuana. CBD products that are derived from industrial hemp would not be governed under OLCC. Is that correct?
I believe they get governed under the
Ag Department.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where
Where THC products from marijuana have to have an OLCC regulation, have an OLCC license, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then would it be a safe assumption then, if a business is working with industrial hemp only, that there could be periodic audits from OLCC to make sure they were following within the regulations and not using products?
Well, I think anytime they're operating, they could be, they could be subject to, periodic review, so to speak.
Can I
I
follow
may
up
have
on
other
that question?
questions after people speak, but that's it for right now.
I have a question following up on that. What authority would the OLCC have to audit a business that wasn't using a product under them? Is that your question? Would the OLCC audit them?
Just wondering if it was safe to assume that there would be some kind of watchful eye that maybe they would be like, okay, these people are making CBD.
We haven't.
Make
They're not
sure.
under their authority.
Well, they have inspectors that go around and try to enforce the law. There's not that many of them, frankly. And so anytime that you're operating in the state of Oregon, you could be inspected if you're doing certain types of business. I mean, I think it's pretty unlikely, frankly. But again, I try not to give people any sort of legal analysis that goes beyond what you're running a business. That's up to you and your lawyers to try to figure out what your exposure is if OLCC is going to come through the door or not.
Yeah.
So one question is, it's your belief that there is a disagreement between the ag bill that was from 2014 and the DEA scheduling CBD as Schedule 1, which happened after that, right? That there is some conflict, and we're going to that courts will figure out which one supersedes, but there is a federal law that makes CBD illegal, whether or not that's the superseding law is in question, right? Even from industrial hemp.
The case law that came out of that is on appeal, and the definition is still, it's being argued about whether or not it's CBD in general, or whether or not it'll be more defined as CBD as it is only extracted from industrial hemp. So yeah, I mean, there's still an open question there. But that's on the onus for that would be on the business itself if it wants to make sure and follow the law or not.
So what's our city's policy if it's open in public, like it doesn't require us to do investigation, but if it's discovered that someone is violating federal law, do we reissue them a business license upon renewal?
If they were found to be in violation of federal law, then yeah, there's a process in our code for us to yank their business license or not reissue it.
So if case law clears up and CBD and the federal government determines, or the courts determine, that the DEA scheduling of it as Schedule 1 supersedes, then anyone that's selling CBD in the city would not be reissued a business license, or we would yank their business license?
There have to be a couple other findings.
Okay. I'm just trying to wrap my
Since right now, the Farm Bill 2014 Farm Bill has specifically indicated that CBD oil derived from industrial hemp is not a controlled product, then what would have to happen for us to consider not issuing a business license is that the federal government would need to intervene and make a determination, and we would need to become aware of it, make a determination that a business operating within the city of Canby is either manufacturing or selling an illegal product. And once we were made aware of that, then we would rescind a business license. But it doesn't happen automatically. It would have to be a determination of the federal government that a violation had occurred. Because if, based on this language, if this ordinance was approved, we would be working under the assumption that the CBD oil that is produced and Canby is derived from industrial hemp, and it would be up to the business owners to essentially certify that they are following state and federal law, which means that they are producing their CBD oil strictly and solely from industrial hemp.
Right. So I guess my confusion, and part of trying to get my head straight about it, is so this language says, as defined by federal and Oregon state law. And my confusion is that two laws are in conflict. So the DEA scheduling of it is in conflict with the Farm Bill. So is it against a federal law? Yes. Is that the superseding federal law? That's a good question. And does this language, like it says, if it's as defined by federal law, and I guess I'm just confused about, are we choosing, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around how this language handles the fact that there's conflicting federal law on the issue and that it hasn't been settled in court definitively.
Yeah.
And what then are, like, if a business says they want to sell CBD, what does this language tell us they can and can't do? The two laws are in conflict, and the court hasn't definitively settled it, right? Does my question make sense? Like, I'm just trying to figure out where do we stand on this given the laws that we have. And please make no mistake about it. I have no problem with CBD and think it should be legal. I just want to make sure that our language is clear and that we understand what the implications of that are and what that means for business licenses and what that means for revocation of business licenses.
Well, when a court rules one way about what federal law is, we know where it is at in terms of that day at that level for that particular area. So for instance, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals was the one who ruled in that particular case under those particular facts, right? So what always happens is the law gets argued, case law gets argued around what the interpretation of certain laws should be. And lawyers get a hold of it and go, well, my case is completely different because it's distinguishable, or they say the opposite, which is my case is exactly on point and this should rule. And it's up to a court to decide if there's a conflict with even case law, if there's a conflict between circuits, if there's, until it gets clear up to the Supreme Court and you have kind of a final say where it kind of locks it in. Certain circuits can even have different cases that kind of, with slightly different fact patterns, have different outcomes. And so, it's tricky. You have to kind of follow the law and try to figure out which one you think is the best law for your area, and then you have to follow it and enforce it. And that's partially on me, because people will ask me, do you think this is a legal business? And I will say, well, what does it say they're going to do? Right?
Okay.
And if they put on their, at this point, using this language, if they put on their business license, we are only going to be dealing with industrial hemp, I will say that sounds legal if that's truly what they're going to do, according to both federal, state, and local law now if you change it. And that's kind of is...
Can I ask another question? The way you said that it would be enforced or the way we handled it. And I'm really not trying to go down a rabbit hole. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. So what stops someone, based on what you just told me, what stops someone from asking for a business license that says that they deal with industrial hemp, getting an OLCC license and setting up a dispensary in town.
You're talking about a front, and this happens, right? There's a laundromat, and we're really selling heroin out the back. And you show up and you bust it. If it happens to be a federal crime, the federal government with their FBI people have to show up. If it's a state crime, then the state people show up. I'm not going to.
Okay.
I don't have bulletproof vest and I don't have guns. You know what I mean? So,
Right,
so I have
right.
to trust that what they're applying
So, because
they're
I
actually
tried
doing.
asking you this earlier today, and I love so much that you're very clear in the way you answer things, like that you have lots of examples. But if someone comes, if I'm asking you right now, is it your opinion legally that CBD oil is legal at a federal level? Do you have a yes or no answer for that?
I have a wiggly worm answer that I gave, and then I have a little bit better one, which is I personally would not do a business with CBD oil because it's still up for debate a little bit in terms of the Ninth Circuit opinion that we're talking about. But this isn't exactly saying CBD oil, go forth, here's your blessing. This is more narrow than that. This is saying index recognize both and statewide. The only thing we're saying, you have to tell us that's what you're going to follow if you want to do the business in our town, which is different than saying go forth and make all CBD oil or whatever, because that's not what I would be comfortable telling anybody to go do. But I don't advise the businesses. I only advise the city. Of a business license to a legal business only, and it has to follow the laws. Well, this still is just saying you have to follow the laws, but we're relaxing the definition of marijuana to allow what is allowable at both the federal and the state level. But they have to get their own lawyer and decide whether or not they're truly following those. Does that make sense?
Ish. As much sense as any answer on this issue makes. I mean, yes, but it's unclear, but that's not because you answered it in an unclear way. That's because I feel like the law is unclear.
Okay.
So it's not you that's being unclear.
Yeah.
It makes as much sense as I think is possible given the situation.
Yeah, and I'm simply trying to, in a place where it's still, there's growing pains and there's still flux in the law, I'm trying to put Canby on safe ground that if we want to relax anything, we can relax this because it says we're going to follow all the laws. Sure. But it recognizes that there are areas of the agricultural product of industrial hemp that are allowable under both levels of law. And so if they want to tell us that's all we're going to do, then we say, okay, because that's actually legal everywhere else. And that's simply what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to like pull any wool over anybody's eyes, because I'm not going to advise anybody to do anything in particular except for get a lawyer and follow the laws.
Yeah. No, I appreciate your.
Yeah, no, hey, that's what this is about. So, Joe, we're going back to the OLCC, right? So they're in place and they're auditing and checking in on dispensaries. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I totally forgot to. Thanks, you guys. The ag department is basically overseeing those that are dealing with the hemp product, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so does the ag department here at the state of Oregon, do they do inspections of the businesses that do, and that might be a question for those of you there on my left when you come up here, but do they do inspections of those businesses that have said,
I have to assume,
fall under this category?
I have to assume they do. This is an area that I've never advised such businesses, and I've never experienced this. I mean, I come from a prosecution background and a city government background, and so I don't have that full picture of experience, although I assume because there are mechanisms for those inspections that they do take place. I'm not sure at what frequency or how severe or serious they are.
Okay. So I'm not in my head that that'll be something you guys will address here momentarily. Yes, thank you. If we leave the current language as tight as we have it by definition, and leave that in plate, what does this inhibit businesses in Canby?
The existing.
Existing businesses, sorry, thank you,
The
existing
rule.
So if we leave this current language in place, are we now handcuffing existing businesses in our community that sell products made of hemp or
Hemp oils, yeah.
non-THC cannabis?
Yeah, our definition as it currently is, it technically meets any of the types of marijuana plant, because it kind of steps back and has the whole family of plant. And so it would disallow, under this, a straightforward reading, it basically encompasses the whole universe of anything that's ever been marijuana.
So then, okay, does this language in any way, the changing that we're talking about doing now, so kind of not being so tight and clearly defining this definition, does this negate, and you may have already answered this question, but I'm gonna ask it again, does it negate what the voters approved or what we put forward to the voters saying from a dispensary standpoint of marijuana?
It's hard for me to get in the voters' intent, and we even talked about voters' intent. I don't want to, I want to sidestep your question, but still give you an answer that I think is meaningful, which is to say, when I tried to help you make this original ban, I believed that I was helping you make a ban on pot shops, that people didn't want, basically the liquor store version of a pot shop.
Right.
And knowing full well that anybody could grow 4 plants in their home at any time. And so, I mean, my assessment of that situation was, we were saying, putting our foot down as far as not dealing with those particular types of businesses. And basically with our insight was mostly, I believe, about the marijuana that gets you high.
Thank you.
But that was, and that's my assumption, I guess, but I thought that's what it was.
Step, you did good.
Okay.
Well, and I have a point to make on that, but I'll save it for discussion since this is Q&A. My question is very similar to the mayor's, actually. So just very straightforward. If we don't change this, do we go to the businesses in town that are selling CBD products and tell them they have to remove it or lose their license? Do we tell the liquor store they have to pull their CBD drinks or lose their license? I mean, how far do we take that with businesses that are already selling the product?
I honestly, if we know specific businesses that are doing that, we should go warn them that they are in violation of our ordinance, and there is a ban on the selling of that product, and you need to stop selling that product, or we will yank your business license.
Okay, and I'll save my debate on language later.
Just a real quick technical one for Joe. We're just addressing plant genus cannabis, right? Not the entire family.
That's the debate.
I'm not really great at that.
Yeah, I'm not.
It's not the entire family of Cannabaceae,
Yeah,
which is mangled Latin.
yeah. What I probably inartfully did was I added everything to it when we first made the ban, not really realizing that it was stepping on the toes of an ag product. And so I'm trying to help you guys back off that definition to allow for what's been allowable. Yeah.
Yeah, well, my point is, you got family up here, you have genus down here, and cannabis is below the family.
Oh, okay.
'Cause the family itself includes all kinds of other really interesting things like hops. And so we're not dealing with that, right? Just the plant cannabis.
We're trying not to. We're trying to just deal with the cannabis family. Yeah.
Making sure.
Okay.
Hey, we don't want to.
He's like, do I have to go back and look at my language?
Yeah. I do have to study science for this.
And the 3 species of cannabis, right? Not
Joe
hops.
is not a botanist.
You didn't know you were going to be one by becoming our city.
I probably should be, actually.
Yeah, next thing we know, next meeting, we're going to have the whole brewery
The brewing industry down here,
in
yeah.
our council chambers. Any other questions of our city attorney so that I can bring?
I might later, but
Okay.
not at this juncture.
Okay. So I do have cards here. So Mr. Barber, would you like to come up and impart some wisdom on us? Thank you for being here, by the way.
Absolutely. I brought my mother. And first of all, I just wanted to take the time to thank the city council members and Mayor Hodson and the administrators and attorney Lindsay there for taking the time to view this as very important. We just want to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about our family and our company. Our family has been a trusted, long-standing produce supply and distribution company, a truck brokerage company, and a major employer in Oregon since 1965. Back in the late 1970s and early 80s, the state of Oregon asked our company, Coastal Brokers, to employ the first wave of Vietnamese refugees, and then over the next 4 decades, employ every subsequent surge of newly arriving legal immigrants from all over the world. Over 46 years, our family employed close to 150 people for 11 different nationalities. Our family's enterprises include many years of research and development, design and engineering, and manufacturing of highly specialized, intelligently automated, proprietary, and groundbreaking technologies. Our family's designs include engineering and manufacturing credentials in the space shuttle, the Tomahawk cruise missile, laser marking technologies, Fluke multimeter, some of the largest solar energy products in America, and numerous additional manufacturing solution technologies. In 2013, our family saw the urgent public safety need for stringently standardized analytical testing requirements and uniformly controlled sampling protocols to ensure that Oregon's cannabis products were free of pesticides, residual solvents, other microbiological contaminants, including mold mildews. Our family founded MRAX Labs. We developed processes and methodologies. We wrote standard operating procedures. We developed protocols for quality controls, quality assurances, and quickly grew our family's company to Oregon's largest full-scope, ORLAP-accredited analytical testing laboratory. In 2014, our family recognized the tremendous financial potential for Oregon agricultural farmers and businesses to capitalize on the multi-billion-dollar global demand for industrial hemp products. These products are used in an estimated 50,000 diverse products across an array of industries, including pharmaceutical, cosmetic, food, textile, construction, pet, bioplastics, paper, recycling, automotive, furniture, beverage, renewable energy, and we could go on and on here for a while. We then founded MRAX Extractors, and our family devoted the last 3 years to designing, engineering, and perfecting industrial-scale extraction technologies and the manufacturing methodologies that position Oregon farmers and businesses to maximize our technological and agricultural advantages to seize this worldwide market demand for superior quality of industrial hemp products to be a front runner in this newly burgeoning, highly prosperous global industrial hemp industry. 2 years ago, we relocated our company from Tiger to Canby to be right across the street from JV Northwest, a premier stainless steel equipment manufacturer in Oregon. JV Northwest manufactures equipment components for us and has proven to be a valuable, advantageous alliance for our company. Our company is family funded and we're debt free. We're not asking for anything of the city of Canby other than your authorization to become an agricultural hub and manufacturer of industrial hemp. We are rock solid, honest, prudent people and methodical, painstaking, and disciplined professionals. Our family loves being in the city of Canby. We would love to continue to be a Canby company and a Canby manufacturer and a Canby employer. We would appreciate the chance to bring additional quality, high-tech, well-paying jobs to Canby and help contribute to Canby's growing long-term economic prosperity. We'd be honored to even play a small role in helping preserve Canby's treasured historical heritage, their deep agricultural roots, and Canby's small-town greatness. We know we would continue to be a good neighbor, good employer, and good community member. We are asking the City Council and the citizens of Canby to amend Ordinance 1427 regarding marijuana definition so we can become an agricultural hub and manufacturer of industrial hemp products. With this business license, in addition to our current 17 employees, we will fill another 30 Canby positions. At this point, I'd just like to take the opportunity to personally show you what we've achieved scientifically at MRX, and our family would welcome you to tour our manufacturing facility. We'd love to show you what we do and have the chance to get to know each of you individually, and that's on behalf of myself, my wife, my dad and uncle and business partner as well. And so I think my mom just wanted to say a few quick words.
My throat's my mouth's so dry and I'm so nervous and tongue-tied, but I just wanted to say, yes, we are a design, engineering, manufacturing company of very high technologies, very intelligent, very automated, very robotic system technologies. But what's near to our heart is becoming the agricultural hub for the state of Oregon, for for Oregon farmers. I am, you might tell that I don't speak like most Oregonians. I was born and raised in southwest Oklahoma, 10 miles above Texas. And I'm 4 generations of farmers and ranchers, cotton, wheat, and cattle. My is 3 generations of farmers in the Tri-City areas, potato farmers. And my hometown in Oklahoma, we were the hub for all of southwest Oklahoma's agricultural growers because we were the and we, in addition to, yes, all the high technology that we manufacture, we will be the agricultural hub connecting farmers, and I know the how vulnerable they are harvest to harvest. And when there is a literally multi-billion global, worldwide industrial hemp industry that's going on all around us, and our country is importing those multi-billions of dollars of industrial hemp oil and other industrial hemp products. And in addition to that, that it should be Oregon farmers.
Your microphone.
What
Sorry,
we are
Greg, thank you.
importing is very inferior. It's not held to any standards as the Oregon Department of Agriculture holds us. It has no safety requirements. It's inferior oil, but worse than that, it's not safe oil. So when we sit here in Oregon and watching that billions of dollars pass by our Oregon farmers and the other farmers in our country, the reason that we want to be the agricultural hub is we want to connect them with the highest quality seeds that exist. I don't know if y'all are aware, but there's 2 brothers, the Crawford brothers, that just live down the road, and they both got their degrees at Oregon State in agricultural. One of the brothers is more scientific, and the other one is more the management side. But they've used their 2 agricultural degrees to now develop and breed the highest quality hemp seeds that exist. So we will be connecting the hemp farmers with hemp seeds that we know are quality. Otherwise, the hemp farmers are so vulnerable to shyster seed producers from around the world. And then we will be connecting them with their harvest and the outlets for that harvest. So we're asking if y'all don't mind, next time that you can carve out 30 minutes, please, every Canby official and every citizen of Canby, if y'all would not mind, to please stop by our family's company. Please let us show you firsthand what we're doing and what we want to continue to do in Canby. And we just appreciate this time that y'all have given us tonight.
What's the name of your company?
MRX, and we can leave you some cards so you'll have the address. We're on Redwood, just right past the Canby Fire Department.
Jonah, I've had the pleasure of sitting down with Jonah and a couple of his team there, and Jonah, some of the, I think, and Patsy, you may have just touched on it in terms of what are the regulations that you guys have to adhere to
So actually, I think what would probably be best from that standpoint, I think we're going to let Ross Day address a lot of the questions regarding regulation.
Okay.
For you. So, but thank you for your time.
Thanks you guys for coming. Appreciate it. Mr. Day, I believe you are up, sir.
First of all, I want to say thank you for saying sir without adding you're making a scene, because I get that a lot. So, Mayor Hodson, Council President Dale, and members of the City Council, my name's Ross Day. I'm an attorney in Portland, one of those horrible Portland lawyers. I actually, well, I live down in Kaiser, where we can drink the water, as opposed to our neighbors to the south in Salem. I do represent, I'm primarily a land use and real estate lawyer, but I represent a lot of cannabis businesses, both marijuana businesses and industrial hemp businesses. So I'm pretty versed in what the laws are and what's allowed and what's not allowed. The one question we had that was, I think, was on everyone's mind initially was this idea that there's a conflict between federal laws. There actually isn't. I'll read you, if I can pull it up, famous last words. The Farm Bill actually says, the 2014 Farm Bill says, notwithstanding the Controlled Substances Act, the Safe and Drug-Free Schools Act, Communities Act, pardon me, Chapter 81 of the United States Code, or any other federal law. And then that's how that the industrial hemp provisions of the Farm Bill begin. So basically they accept from industrial hemp regulation all of the prohibitions in federal law. Okay, so there isn't actually a conflict, with one exception, because us lawyers can never make things simple. And this goes to what I think Council President Dale was asking earlier about kind of the transportation of CBD oil. I am of the illegal opinion that you are not allowed to transport CBD oil derived from industrial hemp across state lines if its intent is for human consumption. How's that for an exception? If you're sending it over state lines and they're going to make shirts or ropes or soap or dog food, that's okay. But if it's going to go, that's my legal opinion. Other lawyers who deal in this think I'm crazy, but maybe I'm just being a little over sensitive about it. But at least as far as intrastate commerce is concerned, there's nothing in the federal law that prevents CBD oil that is derived exclusively from industrial hemp. It's perfectly legal under federal, state, and most local laws. I would, and so to the extent, there's a question about whether or not there's a conflict between federal laws, I'm of the opinion that there is not. Take that for what it's worth. I'm not your lawyer. Obviously, you have to take your legal advice from Mr. Lindsay. And I appreciate Mr. Lindsay taking my calls as we work through this. I believe that the language that he has drafted is spot on. I think it addresses all of the concerns, certainly that we have. There's a case out of Grants Pass, called the Brown case, where the question was whether or not the city of Grants Pass their local ordinances were preempted under state law, and the specific ordinances were related to the growing of cannabis, and Oregon's cannabis laws, which are located in Chapter 475B, have a specific exemption from the local preemption law. Industrial hemp is not exempted. And what that means is that if your ordinance conflicts with state law, your ordinance, at least as it applies to whatever agricultural product we're trying to, what we're trying to process, is not applicable. And so there are a lot of folks who believe, a lot of lawyers who believe that to the extent these bans, local bans, are being applied to industrial hemp, that they're preempted by state law, which preempts local laws banning agricultural products, their seeds, or any derivatives of those seeds. So that's another thing to consider, I think, as well. And I sent all of you a letter. I'm sure you studied it, and you read all the case law and all the statutes and everything else. So I'm not going to, I'll try not to go through those. One other point is the 0.3% THC content. I don't know where that comes from. I get asked that question all the time. Where does that come from, right? West Virginia is 1%. Everyone else is 0.3%. And I don't think there's a magic, there's a reason for that. I think it was just something that somebody said, hey, this sounds good. Honestly, I'm not being flippant either. So with respect to that particular number, that's just the number that's been accepted not only federally in the Farm Bill, but also statewide as well. And I think from my perspective, at least, that's their safest bet. I wouldn't go the West Virginia route. Let's put it that way. So one of the questions was about OLCC, and can OLCC come in and inspect? Absolutely, they can. I don't remember if it was House Bill 3400. I apologize. I don't remember which bill it was from 2015. But OLCC's agents were given specific, the OLCC's marijuana program were given authority to hire agents who had specific authority to inspect any business that was selling product derived from cannabis. And it meant any cannabis, okay? So they have the authority. I have a client, for instance, who has a CBD-only store, okay, down in Albany. And the OLCC came in to inspect her. And she called me and she wanted me to, go yell at them. And I said, well, guess what? They get to do that. And then they wanted to see the certificate. That was another point I wanted to bring up. The state law requires industrial hemp companies to have a certificate that they're actually dealing in industrial hemp and whatnot. I'm of the belief, some lawyers don't think it's something that has to be produced to a local government upon request. I happen to disagree with that. I happen to think that they do have to, because there's no specific exemption in the public records law. One of the concerns I heard from the council, at least from your last discussion, was, well, how do we know? Well, one of the things I would, I don't know if it's a policy or an ordinance, but something you might want to consider is, upon request, you have to produce that document from Oregon Department of Agriculture. So I'm just throwing that out there for consideration. They are regulated, obviously, otherwise they wouldn't have a certificate from the Department of Agriculture. They are regulated by the Department of Agriculture. Not only, obviously, the amount of THC that might be in the industrial hemp products, but also how it's handled, how it's processed, weights and measures, and all those kinds of things as well. So it's not, a fly-by-night kind of thing. It's actually something that's been going on for about 10 years now. And actually it's really kind of been perfected, for lack of a better term, for probably in the last 5 years or so. I think that's about all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions as best I can. I promise I won't bite. Counselor Smith's not here, so.
I have a question. When you say that the businesses can get certificates or should get certificates or have to get certificates from the Department of Agriculture, is that just manufacturing facilities? Does that include people that sell product from industrial hemp but don't manufacture?
Everybody, I apologize.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
Everybody who is a handler of industrial hemp has to have the certificate. So, and a handler is anybody from seed to
farm to table.
Farm to table, thank you.
Yeah, and they get that certificate directly from the Department of Ag, or Is there a,
Yes.
Okay.
I believe that's the right answer. Correct. Yes.
thank you.
Oh, thank you.
No, thanks.
I can never remember if it's them or if it's an extension service or, because when the Farm Bill passed, the exception was, in order to qualify for the exception, the state had to have a pilot program that was run by the State Agricultural College, which was Oregon State. And so the state of Oregon went, yeah, they moved ahead on industrial hemp, and they forgot to start the pilot program. And so they had to go back a couple of years ago and start the pilot program. And so I know that the OSU Extension Service has taken on some of that, but so.
But just as a clarification, because I wrote it down, if we approach a local retailer, in your legal opinion, they are required to have this license?
They have to have
certificate?
this, they have to have the certificate, and I believe you can require them to produce it. I think, but I don't, I'm the last guy who's ever going to advocate for more laws. But I would think, in my opinion, to be consistent, I've had this conversation with Mr. Lindsay quite a bit, to be consistent with what I think the voters, well, what we might think the voters want, it would seem to me that would be something that would be prudent. It's just my humble opinion.
Great.
That answers my question. I was just confused about who needed a certificate. That's
Okay.
great.
Any other questions for?
This is
Mr.
helpful.
Day?
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. Thank you
Thank you,
very
sir.
much.
Appreciate it. New card at the wire, last but not least, Mr. Gwynn. You fill out a card, sir?
I'm Mallory Gwynn, owner of Gwynn's Coffee House. If you don't mind, I'll leave my hat on because the hair is atrocious about it. It's atrocious with it, too. Just ask my wife. Now, I just, the reality is the way what the voters voted on with the language that's there, something has to change because if it doesn't, if you don't do something, then it's not because the blanket of cannabis, indica, sativa, ruberalis, those are all inclusive of what you did, and which includes all industrial hemp, which includes clothes at Fred Meyer's and bird seed and probably about 50,000 other different products that you'll find at the retail level. So unfortunately, you're really working on the letter of the law right now instead of the spirit of the law, you see. And so the letter of the law says if you don't carve out something, then you have to start talking to all of those business owners to be equitable, you see. So something must be done. I don't think you're going far enough. CBD, if I could give you just a little botany lesson here, if it's okay. So, because I've grown hemp, industrial hemp. I've nursed 150,000 plants, so I know a little bit about it. And marijuana is the slang term for THC-laden cannabis. Hemp is still cannabis, but the three species that I just mentioned have been bred to reduce the amount of THC to become the kind of hemp, and some would call it industrial hemp, that no THC or less than 0.3% THC exists in that plant. And that's what they use to extract through amazing machinery, extraction equipment. I think you guys build some of that extraction equipment. CBD oil. CBD oil has no psychoactive nature to it. It would be like Bengay, you know that product? it would be, there's no drug to it. Why the federal government says what it says about CBD is a mystery to a lot of people. Probably the strong lobby of the pharmaceutical industry would be the top-notch reason that they still hold on. But from a very practical perspective, CBD oil is, you can't smoke it and get high, you can't drink it and get high, you might get a headache, I don't know. It's a mystery to me why it resides in a Schedule I on a federal level. But it is. And I understand from a lawyer's perspective that would be a challenge. However, the state of Oregon, along with multiple other states, have legalized marijuana, the THC, recreational use, smoke it, get high, eat edibles, get high, marijuana, and CBD just happens to be attached to that by a very thin thread. And why it is, again, it's a mystery. But here's the reality. It's changing. Ron Wyden, Senator Wyden, was at the Wooden Shoe Tulip at Red Barn Hemp just last week, along with Jim Belushi, by the way. And he is bound and determined to get that extracted out of there. So we can wait around for that to happen because it's going to happen. It's going to be segregated for sure, if not marijuana, recreational use marijuana get its classification dropped as well. But CBD will be the first phase of that. It will be segregated out. That's coming. So the question is are we going to be progressive and say, listen, do the education, do what you need to do, but we're going to include CBD because CBD is like turmeric. It's kind of at that same level, right? You can find it in a vitamin store. You can't, you know what I'm saying? And so are we gonna, and I understand law, and I get that. The federal government isn't gonna go after businesses that are selling CBD because the OLCC and the ag, they both regulate very heavily and by laboratory testing on a very systematic basis. You can rest assured that it's the most regulated product that is produced in Oregon, along with the other states. OLCC is doing a great job. They're understaffed, as we know. But the question is are we going to stop in clothes and birdseed and all that stuff, lotions and all that stuff, or are we going to say, listen, inclusive of that, we're going to allow CBD because it has no psychoactive nature to it. It's like a vitamin, and a dang good one, by the way. So my advocation would be don't stop short. You've got businesses in town that are already going to be affected if you peel out CBD. And I think that's a travesty, especially given the nature of CBD. So I'm just saying my emotional plea based on real firsthand knowledge of the plant and the process that goes into extracting, the testing that goes along with it to ensure that it's under 0.3% THC. And what that essentially is that there's, you can't get high from it. I'm making an emotional appeal, a logical appeal, and a business appeal for those who are already involved with CBD. Please don't stop short. Thank you.
Thanks, Marilyn.
That's what happens when your coffee shop owner is a master gardener.
So I have follow-up questions now, Joe.
Yeah.
based on Mr. Quinn's comment there. Does the language change fall short of the CBD piece, or does that include that ability to sell it?
It currently, what I'm proposing currently says you're going to have to make sure it falls under industrial hemp, that if it's a product from that, it's still going to have to follow suit with federal and Oregon law. And so the CBD oil, I believe the Ninth Circuit case is being appealed. It will also be distinguished with other cases soon enough. But again, I have to be careful not to advise businesses out here about what they're doing. But I believe, as it's currently held under Ninth Circuit law, that CBD is still a Schedule controlled substance, Schedule I controlled substance. Now, whether or not that gets softened, this language actually allows it to come into play the second that the federal government recognizes the industrial hemp or its derivatives, as long as if and when the federal government says it's fine, it's no longer a Schedule I in whatever way they do that, whether it's through actual legislation or through case law, then it will be legal under this language.
I don't understand the answer, though. I mean, with the new language, will CBCs be permitted, CBDs be permitted or no? I mean, I don't.
Well, I'm saying currently it's held that it's a Schedule I controlled substance.
Right.
Therefore, federally illegal.
But in
This
a
current
nutshell-
language allows for the second that industrial hemp or any of its products, as it pertains to CBD, is either by case law or by statute changed, this language allows it to become legal.
I don't know the format and the formalities, but maybe we speak to them.
If you have clarification, then Mr. Day wants to come back.
And they want to say that CBD as it pertains to something that isn't ingested. Am I right with that, Mr. Day?
No, what the Ninth Circuit said was, understand you get 4 lawyers in a room, you're going to get 4 different opinions, right? So my interpretation of the Ninth Circuit case was that the CBD oil that was at issue, it wasn't determined as whether or not it was derived solely from industrial hemp or if it was a combination thereof.
That's correct.
My legal opinion is, and this is how I advise my clients, is that if the CBD oil is derived exclusively from industrial hemp under the Farm Bill, the 2014 Farm Bill, it's legal under federal law, okay? However, what I was saying earlier is the caveat to that is I don't think you can ship it over state lines because they did not accept out that you can only ship it over state lines if it's not intended for human consumption. So that's because it's supposed to be a state pilot program. So they want to keep it in the state if it's going to be used. So my legal opinion is, as long as the CBD oil is derived exclusively from industrial hemp, you're fine under federal law. If you start mixing it, however, that's where you get into big trouble. And again, that's what I advise my clients as well.
Well, and here, what we're trying to do is leave the language as such that opens the door for, people to wrestle about that particular and not the whole universe of marijuana. Because right now, we can't even have that discussion.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? It refines the argument.
And I guess that comes back to what brought us to this point is we screwed the lid down so tight, and we're just trying to just loosen that up enough to be able to go. There's business pieces here that are at play. There's enforcement pieces at play that all of a sudden now we become. should, which that now but allow business doing particular product using industrial hemp.
What
Am I
we're
correct on that?
Yeah, what we're saying is that if industrial hemp and its byproducts are legal from a federal and state perspective, and the business has made a determination that they are meeting federal and state guidelines as they currently exist or may exist in the future, that we will, under this ordinance, we would grant them a business license. We're leaving the onus and responsibility to make that final determination on the business because they also bear the liability ultimately. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create in this ordinance, to create an opportunity and a responsibility, and not leave the responsibility on the shoulders of the city because we don't have the capacity or the capability to make that final determination. We're simply trying to open a door so that decision can be made at the business level rather than because we're opening the door to industrial hemp that is currently closed under the ordinance as it's currently constituted. And that's really all that we're accomplishing here. And at the end of the day, if you adopt this ordinance and the changes that are incorporated therein, what you'll be doing is saying, if you manufacture products from industrial hemp and they are not in violation of federal and state law, you can get a business license. And it's the you that we're trying to really focus on. And the onus and the responsibility, legal and otherwise, for the determination of whether the business meets federal and state law then falls on the shoulders of the business.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may, I think your metaphor on the tightening the cap and loosening it is a perfect one. And I'm not just saying that because you're the mayor, Your Honor. But as I view the ordinance, you're loosening it to the point where it's consistent with federal and state law and no further. Right? You could loosen it more and it would be consistent with state law, but it wouldn't necessarily be consistent with federal law. Right. That's how I say. I think it's a great metaphor.
Thanks. Any other questions?
No questions.
Let's do it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah.
Can I make an?
Yeah, please.
Okay. I move that we adopt Ordinance 1488, amending Ordinance 1427 regarding marijuana definitions.
Second.
Okay, so motion has been made by Councilor Height, second by Councilor Hensley, to approve ordinance 1488, amending ordinance 1427 regarding marijuana definitions. Discussion.
You know,
I have a
things to say.
quick thing to add, Joe. Do you happen to have the ordinance 1427 language with you? I forgot mine at home.
I do. Here, do you want I have the old copy here that I put in this file. And I'm just handing her
Thank you.
a copy of our ordinance 1427 back when it was,
When we initially put the ban on?
yeah.
Okay.
Do you want a moment? And
Just a quick second here. I wanted to see if it had the word cannabis in it.
And I'm sorry that
And it-
wasn't,
okay.
I'm sorry that wasn't
No, that's all
put
right.
in the packet.
Okay. I was just looking to see if it had the word cannabis or anything in it, and it does. It does. So my point to speak to the rub for me was this was something that the voters kind of backed us up on, that they wanted this ban, but the pot shop image is like what Mr. Lindsay said was, I think, the intent. And if you look at the actual measure that the people voted on, it says that the measure removing a citywide ban on marijuana businesses. Shall the city of Canby allow the establishment of marijuana businesses within the city? And it doesn't mention anything about hemp or cannabis or anything. So the vision of marijuana as the THC product that we know is really the question on the ballot.
You're
And I don't think
reading
that
from the
is
ballot itself.
The ballot that
Yeah,
they
yeah.
actually voted on. And I don't think that language is completely in the ordinance as they voted on it. I think this ordinance is actually written further than what the people were looking at when they voted. That's just kind of why I wanted to see that. So thank you, Joe.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
Sarah,
Sarah, go ahead.
she was first.
If you haven't watched a meeting yet, I'm going to talk for a few minutes. So I'm going to vote to approve this, but I have a couple of things to say about how this happened and where I stand on it and where I stand moving forward. Number one is that I have no issue with the content of what we're voting on tonight, but I have huge objections with the process. So I object to sending something to the voters. I think the word marijuana in the ballot that they saw is still ambiguous because there's not really it's a slang word. Whether one person interprets it one way or another person interprets it another way, we're still assuming what their intent was, because I'm not sure that if you ask everyone on the street what marijuana means, you get the same answer more than once. So I disagree that we're not assuming intent. However, what I disagree with is that we sent something to the voters, it had ambiguous language in it, and then a year and a half later, we come back and we decide what we think they meant with language that we gave them. It was our obligation to give them clear language to begin with, and I hate the precedent and the idea that we would send something to voters and then a year and a half later bring it back and redefine the language that they voted on. I think that's, I just don't like the way that feels. I object to when governments do that in general. If you're going to vote, the government shouldn't change the definitions later. It should go back for a vote. That's where I stand on the process. I hate the idea of assuming the intent of voters. We had someone last month that told us that she doesn't care if it's CBD or THC. She voted the way she voted. So it's reasonable to say that there are people that voted for this moratorium that are going to object to us redefining the language. I'm still going to vote for the language change. I'll get to that, but I just want everyone to know I really seriously object to the process. And we put sloppy language in it, or the city did, or whoever wrote it. I'm not sure who wrote it. I wasn't on council at the time, but it's sloppy language. But it's not our job to interpret what the voters meant. However, I agree with the idea that CBD, I'm pro CBD. I think we should have, I object in general. So I'm comfortable with letting the business owners interpret what federal law means and not making that our obligation. It's really not our obligation or place anyway, and I think we allow business owners to interpret federal law all the time and step outside of that. I do think, however, by passing something like this, the moratorium is redundant, and by that I mean we apologize that you can't have a business license if you're in violation of state or federal law. So at that point, what all the moratorium does is prevents us from being eligible for state shared revenues of the tax generated by any funds from the marijuana industry, from the cannabis industry. So my preference would be to just get rid of the moratorium, because at this point we have a moratorium that doesn't change city law in any fashion except to make us ineligible for shared revenues. And I object to that because I think that we should be eligible for shared revenues. I think in general, the idea of a moratorium is objectionable because I think it's government overreach. I don't like the idea of governments over-regulating businesses based on political opinion or personal opinion or a personal moral, and I think that's what the moratorium does. I think the idea that if a Christian bookstore or a gun store wanted to come in town, that a city council with a different political persuasion would put a moratorium on that. I just don't like the idea of moratoriums in general. Let the business owner take their liability for what they're doing and what they're not doing. And I hate the idea of a city government telling a business owner what they can and can't do, and assuming that position for them. So my ask is, I'm going to vote for this. I hate the process. I hate the moratorium. I think we should get rid of the moratorium in general. I'm not going to ask you guys to do that because I'm pretty sure I know how the vote would go. However, my ask is going to be, if we are going to assume intent, if we're going to assume intent for the voters on behalf, I think that we have an obligation to send a potential rescission or repeal of the moratorium back to the voters, because I think political opinion has changed in the last 2 years. I still think it represents government overreach, and I'm comfortable voting for this legislation, but my ask from you guys is that you support me in moving forward on getting a repeal on the ballot to see how the voters feel 2 years later, now that we know that not every dispensary looks like a brothel, or that it brings every hoodlum come from wherever into the city, and that people have had more experience and awareness of the product, both as an agricultural product. I mean, we are an agricultural town, and we have some 20-odd grow businesses in our fire district, so we're certainly not immune to the existence of marijuana or its importance in our economy regionally. So I'm going to vote for this. I think we're assuming voter intent, and I think that if we're going to assume voter intent, we should send a repeal back to the voters and see where they stand on it 2 years later.
I can't disagree with Councilor Spoon on the process. In fact, Joe and I were just talking about how we kind of should have been hammering this out a little further and been more clear in language on the front end. And speaking to the voters' intent, I'm not saying that I can say that all 59% of the town that voted to keep the ban in place thought that way. I just can tell you from the vast experience of people I interacted with, that was their intent. And so I'm not intending to sound like I'm speaking for all 59% of the town. So wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. Yes, sir. If you got something.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, coming into this, I had three big concerns. The first was, where's the federal law at? And I think through our discourse tonight, I won't say we, I'm as comfortable as I can be given the current state of the law and my understanding of it, that we are not giving permission to operate a business that's in violation of federal law. This council's affirmed that we would not do that. Who knows what a future council will do, but that's been our position. So I'm at peace that we are not giving permission to something that's illegal on the federal level. Regarding voter intent, sometimes courts and legislatures find themselves wrestling with what did the voters intend. I am comfortable that given the context at the time, the big swirl of the ballot measure and the laws that came on, that we are not violating voter intent. I likewise share the opinion that the voter was thinking of psychotropic marijuana and its derivatives. Compelling issue like this, what do you do when you find out that legislation that you've passed isn't quite right? Is there a remedy? Is there a repair? Irritates the daylights out of me when Salem rewrites initiatives that have been passed by the voters and says, well, they didn't really mean that, or we don't like it, so we'll change around it. So I definitely share that concern and that angst. In terms of government overreach, the moratorium to me is not a government overreach. It was enacted by a due vote of the electorate. The people chose. It was not the council enforcing that. Now, did we pass a moratorium? We did indeed.
That was the way the House bill was written.
That was the way the House bill was written. Perhaps we did overreach there, but we did the typical process. You take public hearings, you have public input, you make a decision from the dais, and we did enact a moratorium. State legislation then said that we were required to have that affirmed by the electorate, and we did. So in that case, to me, the electorate had chosen at the time. Overturning the moratorium, to me, that would be an egregious violation of voter intent. They passed it. We are not in a position, as I understand it anyway, to overturn that. Has sentiment changed in the electorate? Are they happy with that decision? I don't know. If they are, I am comfortable that there's an initiative process available to make that happen. I don't know that the council needs to drive that. Grassroots can drive it. There's a very good initiative process in place to do that. And that my other concern about abolishing the moratorium is that it currently provides a barrier of protection that the voters wanted against the change in federal law. So if we were to drop the moratorium, if it were even possible for us to do so, and federal law became permissive, right, Joe, then there would be no barrier against dispensaries in the town. Is that a correct interpretation?
You're asking if...
In the absence of the moratorium, and the federal law said, we're good, it's okay, you can have marijuana, it's not a scheduled product anymore. There would then be no barrier to dispensaries.
If we got rid of our moratorium And then federal law changed and allowed for the selling of marijuana in any form, then the selling of marijuana in any form could be done here as it could be done anywhere else.
So the voters expressed an intent, and it would violate their intent and lose that protection if we were to have the moratorium. Now, if the voters want to pursue that through the initiative process, I'm great with that, Mr. Mayor. That's how our country runs, and it's a wonderful feature that we have. Given all of that, I do support the motion. I would like to point out, this is a big decision, and we're barely at a quorum here, but should point out that there is another opportunity for the other councilors to be engaged. There'll be a second vote, right?
Correct. There has to be a second reading at the next meeting.
Yeah.
And another opportunity for public input then as well.
Correct. And I likewise share that it is a big decision, and that's why I have done a lot of extracurricular homework to understand more clearly the differences between industrial hemp and marijuana with THC, including visiting a dispensary on my vacation over the weekend. And I had a lot of questions for that guy. And I also did visit MRX, so yeah, you're welcome, of course. It wasn't a decision to take lightly, so I did a lot of homework.
That's right.
Yeah, I actually don't think it's too big of a decision. I'm comfortable interpreting the voter intent, which to me clearly was, yeah, they didn't want psychotropic marijuana shops in town. They're fine with industrial hemp, I'm sure. I mean, 0.3% or less THC, I'm sure would be fine by voter intent. So I'm happy to interpret that. And so I just think, yeah, we're cleaning up our amendment, and I'm delighted that we're going to open it up for the industry. So there we go. That's it.
Okay.
Can I call for the vote?
Well, you can in just a second. I just want to echo much of the sentiments up here as well. This is not, I mean, there was a lot of research to go into this, because I wanted to understand it more as well. In fact, I'm going out to, was it Red Barn or Wooden Shoe tomorrow morning to get a tour of their facility and, again, bombard them with a bunch of questions. And I spent, I think, almost 2 hours with the MRX group and what they're doing and what they're trying to accomplish. And so, I mean, these are the things that we get elected up here to do and to analyze and look over. I do agree that, to me, at the time when we passed the language of this, that yes, it was against the dispensary piece of the recreational aspect. Am I reading intent? Probably. Am I open to if the initiative process, because that is an option, which we were talking about earlier, right? That is a process that is available that can be done. If we want to open that up and overturn that aspect, absolutely. That's their rights. It is, and so I appreciate everyone's patience as we go through this. This is the process that we go through. This is how the sausage gets made. It's not pretty, but we get to an end result. And so we don't always agree, and that may be the case on some pieces. But this is the exercise, and this is what we do. And so, yeah, this one I did. It was a lot of just digging into, talking with people that were in the business and ran dispensaries and ran farms and create equipment for the industry. So trying to understand, because I believe there was a specific piece our voters did not want to see in Canby, and that was, green, not Red Cross signs, but Green Cross signs and a dispensary in our community. And so I think the language here that we're changing, it doesn't go as far, I suppose, as Mr. Gwynn would like us to see go, but it loosens the lid a little bit, to continue with that analogy, to allow us at least to move in that direction. Change is not always easy, and it's sometimes slow. So I don't have a vote in the matter, but I wanted at least my thoughts on the record on that matter. So Now, Councilor Wright, if you want to call for the vote, you're more than welcome to do so.
Thank you, I will do so.
All right. All those in favor of passing ordinance 1488, amending ordinance 1427 regarding the marijuana definitions, please respond with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That carries 4-0. Thank you all very much. I really appreciate the dialogue. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
When-
My only question, food for thought, is that if you go with a grassroots initiative, if you allow a grassroots initiative to pull it back on ballot at the next general election, and they vote yes, and the federal government still has it as a Schedule I narcotic, what say you then?
State, federal law.
That is a perfect question for food for thought.
It's just,
And I appreciate, because that,
Appreciate the asking.
because that would come up. So, thank you, Mallory.
And thank you, Mayor.
I'll move on to ordinance 1490. Kim?
This is adopting a franchise agreement with MCI Metro Access Transmission Services Corporation, DBA Verizon Access Transmission Services, a non-exclusive franchise to construct, operate, and maintain a telecommunications network and provide telecommunications services within the city of Canby, Oregon.
Excellent.
And this is me presenting this. This was a applicant who came in who wanted to be treated like all of our other franchisees as it pertains to the telecommunications world. And they are getting basically the same exact sort of franchise agreement that we have at least, I think, 4 or 5 other folks here in town who want to be in our right-of-way and take advantage either of current fiber or sometimes put in their own fiber in our ground to be able to offer services to folks at whatever price they're setting. And so what we do is, this is an area that you're familiar with franchises that are exclusive, like our K-Hoots. This is an area where we're non-exclusive, so when people come here and they take on the same sort of contract that everybody else does with the opportunity to be in our right-of-way, that we have other ordinances that not only control kind of if they're going to dig around, repair it, if they're going to put facilities anywhere, what the responsibilities are. And so those are governed currently by our Municipal Code 1236. We also have a resolution that was set several years back that sets the fees for that. So those fees have to be followed, as well as there's a generalized 7% built in, and that's the statutory maximum under law for franchises. Everybody else, franchisee, nothing special really about it. It's just a different name of somebody who wants to do business in the same way that everybody else does in this arena.
Okay. Joe, is this the group that came and approached us about the aerial?
No, what's interesting is Verizon has separate companies or sister companies, or however you want to put it, and they came in. Verizon was one of them who came in with the canister idea, and then they were aggressively trying to seek several opportunities, and when they met with a little bit of resistance to the 7% idea, they have kind of fallen off the map, so to speak, or taken their, because I had set actually a date earlier for them to show up. There was also one named Mobility that I tried to set a date for as well, and then that date wasn't going to work. And then I haven't heard back from those people as well. So that is a new area of industry that I think they're trying to move quickly into places, and if they can get to yes really easy, they seem to go with it, and if they have to face I think this law calls for a level playing field, so we have to treat everybody the same.
Sure.
And so when they heard that the level playing field here is at the statutory maximum of 7%, that I think caused them pause. And so then they tried to articulate that they were different, but that's neither here nor there on tonight's thing. But this is different.
Okay.
It's both a Verizon company, but I guess they're different wings and with different.
I guess I'm trying to wrap my mind around the technology piece that they're looking to do. Is this like similar?
Oh, these guys just want to be in the ground and act like a telecommunications company. So they just want to be a company that has apparently more control over their facilities when they're here, so that they can offer whatever services that the cable can provide, whether it be TV or internet.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Joe, in the past, and it's been a while, I'm sorry I can't be more specific. In the past, we've had some kind of go around with the calculation of percent of revenue.
Yeah.
As to whether it was traditional telephony or whether it was digital, say Ethernet.
Yeah.
How does that come to play here?
The calculation, the way we further kind of define the way we calculate fees is set out in 1177, so they'll face that same level of calculation when it comes to slight differences in a kind of accounting slash whatever you want to call it, the services that they provide. But they will be treated the same as, we have Direct Link and Wave, and then I believe Lightspeed and at least one other, but I forget what it is right now, and they all fall under 1177. So sorry if I can't be, I'm like you, more specific, but that is laid out in that particular resolution. They're not only aware of it, it's in our it's in the staff report too, but I've sent them copies of that too, so they're aware of it.
And can you remind us, because I can't remember, we had some concerns about when the two principals in town for telco, when their franchise agreements came up for renewal, there were some things we wanted to do to be current with technology, make sure the playing field was level. There'd been some conversation in the past of how that might affect others like Lightspeed and now the applicant.
Well, and maybe this fleshes out the answer earlier too, is that there are, to be clear, people in our right-of-way that don't have ending points or starting points in Canby.
Yeah.
and so there was a challenge to even figure out who uses the fiber and whether or not we can charge them by the linear foot of fiber, because they technically flow through our right-of-way. And not only do we have that statutory ability to capture their use of our right-of-way, but we also have an obligation for a level playing field. So there is that piece of it, but there's also this idea that, and I think the level playing field has to win out, but the idea that when people put in a ton of infrastructure and invested kind of in the town, and then other people come and piggyback off of it.
Right.
But I think where we left that was, and then we had the dark fiber folks coming in through grants, federal grants at the time, and the county was going to try to do that. I think where we had to begrudgingly land was that that's the way the industry works. And so I think when you're investing in, we were happy to have CanbyTel here putting in, and now Direct Link, right, is what it's become. But customers of them, and they're a co-op, I believe, right, benefited from them putting in high fiber when nobody else did.
Right.
And so they gave their customers a great product and a great service. But still they operate in a system where I think they get to charge people for using that great service when it's other companies and competitors, but we leave that all up to them. We basically, for the level playing field from our perspective, we end up billing, or we end up showing up on people's bill, basically. You see like the local taxes and all that, and it has to be the same. It has to show up that you're this customer, that's how much the city's cut is of this. and regardless of whether or not the companies themselves and the industry itself has an ability to kind of get back some of your investment by being able to charge people who use your lines. But that's up to them and their business models, if that's helpful.
Did we get any input from Direct Link or Wave?
We did with these folks, and it was kind of muddled. We got input from them when the canister folks were here at the same time, and then these guys have kind of been the longest lasting, so to speak. And so at that time, there didn't seem to be any objection. Obviously, they can't really object to competitors in the non-exclusive market anyway,
right.
But they did not have, it wasn't like, oh, don't deal with them because they'll rip everybody off. Nothing like that came out of it. So there was nothing kind of anecdotal even, whether or not, we can't really give them because it's not exclusive, we can't give them a veto power over it anyway, but no, I didn't hear any heartburn.
Okay, I was just more concerned about level playing field arguments that have come up before. We invested huge and now somebody else doesn't have to, and they're going to string aerial type of things. So.
Yeah. Well, and these guys definitely know that they if they were going to do, they can't do anything above ground. They would have to get permission in advance and all that sort of thing. So, I mean, we're treating them exactly the same as policy-wise that you guys have established as well.
And if they want to, they have to negotiate their own access to, say, Canbytel or Wave Conduit.
That's my understanding of it.
Okay. And there'll be 2 readings on this anyway, right?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, if you have additional questions, and if obviously if our other counselors do too, I'm more than happy to entertain them in the meantime, or even on when lights and cameras are off next time.
Councilor Hyde or Councilor Spoon, any questions on this or comments?
Joe, some questions earlier I had some questions about how we can even enforce a franchise fee, how we calculate it, how we determine how much business is done over a wireless now, we do apparently get paid franchise fees on similar agreements, which was a concern of mine. So,
Yeah, ongoing question, like how do you
really know?
How do you quantify the error?
Right, yeah. How do you do that?
Right.
How do you quantify error? And then the railroad, which runs through our town, which we know runs a lot of utilities either along beside it or underneath it, which we don't collect anything from, but the railroad does, so.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We've had lots of go-arounds on this piece over the last 10 years. So.
Yeah, I called Joe and I said, exactly how do we determine how much transmission Verizon does over our lines? Like how do we, or through this bouncing signal? But there is like a methodology to getting the franchise fee. So that answered my primary question.
And built into our telecommunications ordinance is kind of that, the way in which that's determined and how often we can demand to see their records and such too.
Okay. Before we get into a motion, we have a couple of people that want to comment. Anton, pronounce your last name for me, sir. Newhold, thank you. Yes.
My nickname is Tony, so I go by Tony.
Okay.
Let me talk here today. So I have a history in computer repair and telecommunications industry. Also working as a building tech specialist over for the Canby School District right now. I've worked for Forest Grove School District as well. So I have some experience with different communication providers and that kind of stuff. Used to live in Idaho. We can't hear you. Oh, sorry. Used to live in Idaho.
There we go. Where
I also dealt with different telecommunication services like Comcast and bigger companies, that kind of stuff. So just typical experience with big internet companies. So I did have a question really quick. So it says that Metro Services is doing business as Verizon. And it said that on Verizon's website that they use that in areas where they have to. Is that something that's been understood, or is there any more information on that as far as why they're operating with this? Do we have like a rule where only local companies can be going into Canby, or why isn't Comcast here yet, I guess?
No, it isn't a local rule, and they're doing business as is their choice as it pertains to how their corporation's set up and then how they're treated in Oregon. But I mean, that's about as interesting and as far as I'll take it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, to answer your question, I mean, again, we're kind of commenting on history here, why Comcast is not in Canby. Honestly, it has probably everything to do with expense, and how do they, as we were talking earlier, how do they partner with and piggyback on, somebody else's infrastructure to come out to Canby. So 6 years ago, 5 years ago, so Clackamas County was doing a big fiber project for rural parts of Clackamas County and part of federal grant, and they wanted to connect into Canby. The challenge was they wanted to run aerial telecommunication lines. We don't allow aerial, so they were going to literally run it to the closest point would have been just on the other side of the railroad tracks by Baker Prairie, and then they'd have to go underground. Well, even all of that was cost prohibitive to their project and whatnot, and the concern with that was brought forward by Wave and DirectLink was that could potentially be a gateway for Comcast to piggyback on, pay the county to then provide that link into Canby. So that became a big piece of Comcast, which is a much bigger, multi-billion-dollar company, it wasn't a level playing field in their opinion. So that's some of that backstory on the Comcast piece. Right now, I truly believe it's probably because it's a cost piece for them right now. That's how I read the tea leaves right now on that front.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I guess the thing I wanted to say, though, about it was that Canby's benefited from a surge in internet speeds over the past decade. I mean, that's interesting how it's happened, even though it's been cost prohibitive. And I mean, I guess that'd be a question to you guys. It's my first council meeting I've been to. Yeah, it's nice to get more information about it, just kind of understand where we're coming from here. I saw that Canby Telecom turned into DirectLink, and I love DirectLink. I love Canby Telecom, what they've done. And they even got voted the best fiber provider in the country a couple years ago, which I find absolutely fascinating and awesome, considering they beat out Google Fiber, which they're all over the place. And they're regularly considered the best in the world. So
we were officially the first gigabit city in Oregon.
And that's absolutely incredible. That's amazing. And I love what has happened here specifically, and that's why I want to keep on living here. So with that, it seems to be in thanks to how we've kept out some large players, at least in my opinion. How I've seen other companies, when Comcast does come into a town, they tend to kind of use some strong arm tactics, be it through predatory advertising or forcing people into a situation where it seems like they only have one option, and you call the other companies and they get some kind of fee or whatever else it is to do business with you or something like that. Or, apartment complexes get kind of strong armed into it as well, or they get paid off to do that kind of thing. They have a lot of players, and they can convince a lot of people to do what they want.
And that's the crux of your concern, is that Verizon coming in under this guise of this company is
it might be
a squeeze play on something else.
It might kind of ruin what we have going on here.
Okay.
So that's mainly what I'm asking about. Okay. I do have a couple of questions, though. So if a company like that does come in, be it Verizon or the next one that does come in, do we have any way of sort of fighting back against any sort of predatory advertising tactics? I did see that Wave has a truck out there, and they're advertising with their truck. That's interesting. I haven't seen that in a small town before. But Wave isn't so bad. They're kind of a local-ish company, West Coast. But with Comcast and Verizon, I mean, if they do start getting really aggressive with their advertising, advertising all over the place, and they start trying to strong-arm other companies out a little bit in this town, is there anything that we have to fight against that? I know that we have our fees, but once they get their arms in here, it's going to be kind of hard to get them out.
From a city perspective, I do not believe that we have anything in place as a city. That would purely be up to the competing businesses to be able to either file those types of lawsuits or battle it on their front. That's not something that we would even come remotely close to probably getting into.
Yeah, we wouldn't do anything to interfere with open commerce. And if a company is coming into town and advertising in a manner that meets all of the city codes, we're not going to interfere with it. I think that the overarching goal that the city has is to make sure that the residents who live in this community get the best service for the dollar that they spend. And I think that our residents are intelligent enough to make that decision. And I don't think that that any business, whether it be Verizon or Direct Link or Wave or any other businesses, is going to be successful trying to strong arm either the city or the residents of the city into making decisions that are not in their best interest.
Okay. All right, that kind of answers my questions there then. With that, I mean, Verizon has had a huge history in making sure that local governments, local cities, and that kind of stuff end up getting into some kind of weird arrangement where it's exclusive. I realize we're not exclusive right now, but they work over the years. They work very hard at that. I mean, they were a big proponent of the anti-net neutrality, situation we have going on right now as well. So it's just a big concern for me. That's why I decided to come tonight. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to me.
We appreciate that, and
Okay.
it definitely.
Thank you for the
worth
information.
Keeping an eye on that. I mean, you're right, and a lot of their practices have been, Verizon is a small example. I mean, Comcast and another one, but and we're seeing them consolidate into smaller or much larger conglomerates that will throw their weight around. So, thank you, appreciate that. Yeah. And Miss Marin? Morin, yes. Yes. You want to just come up here to the table here on the microphone? Okay, well, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Mayor Hodson, councilors. I'm, of course, Jessica Morin. I'm a citizen here in Canby. And my concerns are, of course, about wireless radiation and the effects that could be experienced from it. So I am more concerned about what's above ground, not below ground.
And this is particularly exclusively underground, this particular franchise. So if that helps alleviate some of those issues.
Yes,
okay.
Which it did.
Okay, perfect.
It was good to have that clarified here tonight, and that that Canby prides itself on being wired, on having things be underground, and I just worry about what happens above ground. How things are progressing, in this country right now as far as wireless technologies go. Neighboring cities, I have observed, show signs of, other technology being placed on power poles. In regards to like 5G potentially. And also more evidence surrounding the whole smart meter issue. And in Southeast Portland, I did find something that would resemble something much like what 5G would be, meaning a tower like that. And these towers are connected to smaller antennas that have transmissions. And with those transmissions, it just doesn't look very aesthetic either. No. And I've recently noticed it in Oregon City, close to Langdon Farms in Wilson. And, with that radiation, like if I was to, I'm into visuals, sorry.
Okay.
And like, let's say, this is a tri-field meter. It measures radio frequency. And if we were to put it to radio frequency waves and just basically it's, oh, see, right there.
Yeah, it's making the cell call out. It's the RF from that.
Yeah, and cell phones, they continuously make those types of transmissions through data even. And so, I'll put that over there. And so studies have been done, of course, even internationally. The United States currently does not have any levels established or safe levels established, really, for radio frequencies. I'm going to exhibit it here. And according to, starting with the World Health Organization, they are classifying radio frequency as a Class B carcinogen, which is possibly carcinogenic. And also, there's a bioinitiative report of 2012 that's composed of hundreds of studies, basically, and all have shown effects from radio frequency. I can hand these out to you guys later through.
I want to make sure that our city recorder gets those. That'd be great, and that we'll get those in our notes.
Yes.
Are you concerned about that specifically the Verizon piece was going to be above ground and emitting these pieces was the concern, or your kind of concern is
it's not so much although that was concerning to see that Verizon's name was on there. Mm-hmm. Knowing Verizon and that they could use it as like a saddleback or saddleback.
Well, and
to something else.
To alleviate maybe any fears in terms of this particular company does have a 5G rollout process that they are doing. This is not part of that process. This is just the underground, potential either cable or internet, using what's under the ground and sometimes putting it under the ground. But you're right, maybe to be vigilant if you're worried about the above ground stuff, to, stay tuned, because there is potential for, obviously, as other cities are doing this, people might approach us. So, make sure you're looking at the agendas, and when you see a telecommunications franchise, that could potentially be that, right? You could even call and see, is this the above ground ones or is this the below ground ones? And that could be kind of helpful in you determining whether you wanted to come and talk about the dangers of the above ground ones, because I think it's good information to hear, and please do leave that, or at least copies of it, so that we can study it, because I think that's important before we make those decisions about what goes above our ground. Anything above ground, there will be a for anything ground, if that should feel good, or better. Okay, perfect.
And so, so it is a good thing to hear that, yes, you guys will have a meeting such as this to approve such things from happening. And the thing is to just get a conversation going, at least, about the effects of this overhead radiation that we're placing in our cities. And, you know, like in Canby recently, like around February of this year, there were the unfortunate, you know, suicides that happened. And, you know, just kids going out into the front of the, you know, into the line of trains, and just seeing this, it's kind of, it makes me feel like there's something more to this. And given all the independent research that I've done, and seeing how these things can affect people, I just wonder what if. And, you know, given studies that have been done in like UK, this is exposure to a smart meter. This is before exposure and after exposure. It definitely doesn't look pretty with after.
Sure.
And this was with a live blood sampling, dark field microscopy. And I will leave information about that with you guys too.
Yes, please do.
And as far as safe EMF levels, there are none in the United States, basically. You know, the guidelines for general public are 833 milligauss by the highest, you know, standards. However, the Bioinitiative report of 2012 is stating 1 milligauss, or 0.001 microwatts per radio frequency. And for the higher standards on radio frequency, it's 1,000. And so I'm thinking that this needs to be taken a look at. And then also Environmental Health Trust is a good one.
Okay.
And it takes a look at like the risks of 5G, the placement of towers, that there is that aesthetic thing too.
This is all great information that I obviously we're going to, because a lot of the pieces that you're bringing up, in all honesty, I know probably next to nothing. A lot of what you're bringing forward here. I leave a lot of that technology stuff here to our resident council president, because that's his forte. But if you want to leave that, please leave those items with Kim there on the end. And when we start to have these things come up, we will definitely be using this information to help us and in the future here. Okay?
And, yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
It was my first time, so.
No, you did totally just fine. Okay.
Yeah, whatever you want to make sure we look at, please just put it in the pile. If you want to leave it with us, we'll look at
I
it.
brought copies.
Okay,
about
perfect.
10 copies of each one.
Okay, perfect.
That all together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can I take any other questions or conversation piece here on the ordinance? Do we have
sir.
Do we have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move for ordinance 1490, adopting a franchise agreement with MCI Metro Access Transmission Services Corporation, doing business as Verion Access Transmission Services, a non-exclusive franchise to construct, operate, and maintain a telecommunications network and to provide telecommunications services within the city of Canby, Oregon.
Second.
Motion's been made by Council President Dale, seconded by Councilor Hensley to approve ordinance 1490, adopting a franchise agreement with MCI Metro Access Transmission Service Corp., DBA Verizon Access Transmission Services, a non-exclusive franchise to construct, operate, and maintain a telecommunications network and provide telecommunications services within the city of Canby. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That carries 4-0. We don't have any new business this evening. City Administrator business staff reports. Nothing this evening. Second opportunity for citizen input. Anybody like to provide any other input? No? All right. Kim, action review.
You've approved the consent agenda. You've adopted resolutions 1294 and 1295. You've adopted ordinance 1485, and you've approved ordinances 1488 and 1490 to come up for second reading on August 1st.
There is no exec session this evening.
There's none.
And I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I paused. I'll second.
Motion has been made by Councilor Spoon, seconded by Councilor Hensley to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Anyone opposed? All right. We are adjourned. Good night, Canby. Thank you very much.